What happened to shows like Good Luck Charlie? When was the last time you watched a modern show, and I mean a modern show, that looked like Good Luck Charlie? I'm talking about one of those multi-camera studio set canned laughter joints with overwrought dialogue and the most potent melodrama surrounding the most milquetoast of conflicts. When was the last time you watched a show like that? It's very likely that it was Good Luck Charlie, which I think both says something about the state of television and also can be seen as proof that Disney Channel in its peak was of equal importance to the TV landscape during its heyday. But before we get into all of that, what was Good Luck Charlie to begin with? The show began on April 4th, 2010, and ended on February 16th, 2014, and in a similar way to Wizards of Waverly Place, I actually never saw the finale of this series. By 2013, I finally had internet access in my home, and so very quickly my entire personality and viewing habits shifted entirely to the internet. I was really into Minecraft Let's Plays, O2L, Andrea Russett, and then eventually stalking Five Sauce on their Instagram pages. So not a lot of room for Good Luck Charlie during the airing of the final season that it had. By the way, I'm currently at my dad's house, so you might recognize the background from when I tried to make pancakes at 4 a.m. during my decom video. I changed my lock screen, This is the Lawrence brothers. These are the people who star in the movie.
Okay.
Sit down, lay down. Yeah, you're all comfortable.
What's my name? Not Benny, it's the other guy. On iCarly.
Freddie. You're Freddie Benson.
Freddie B.
I did a lot of really fun things during that whole series. I was hanging out with my aunt. She came to visit us for a couple of days. And I ended up watching a big chunk of the show with her. I think it was after the Spencer cheating scandal. I can't exactly remember. I just remember ranting about Spencer a lot with her. So as far as she's aware, I'm a Spencer hater, which not to spoil my thoughts for the future, but I'm not really at the end of the day. But I had a lot of pent-up rage about Spencer built up throughout the years, because I didn't really talk with many people about the show on the playground or whatever. The courtyard, is it demeaning to call a middle school outdoor area a playground? Because you feel so grown up when you're that age. But anyways, since my aunt is a boomer, I thought it would be a good kind of person to do a litmus test on whether or not this show was going to be ranked among the greats of sitcom history. And not that it's Beverly Hillbillies or I Love Lucy levels of quality or anything, but or at least enjoyability for a boomer, I guess I should say. But if she enjoyed it, if she got a laugh out of it in the same way she would an episode of the Beverly Hillbillies, then I think it would succeed in its job of what it intended to do. I actually really started scripting this video while I was working on the decom series. I think that was when I was in that weird, nebulous point of the 2000s. Stepsister from Planet Weird era reviewing as I was watching the movies, where I was I want to talk about something else, something from a little bit later in the Disney Channel timeline. So that's when the script really started to sing for this. But it only really started getting developed to a point that it is now, a couple weeks ago. So by the next time I go on vacation in August to see 5 Seconds of Summer twice, maybe I'll finally get around to watching Stuck in the Middle or Andy Mack or whatever. I don't know. What other late stage quote unquote Disney Channel shows do y'all want me to watch? Let me know. I won't promise I'll make videos on them, because if the video ideas don't come from the watch through, then the video isn't going to happen. But if you have any suggestions for Disney Channel shows, I'd love to hear them. So why do I want to talk about Good Luck Charlie specifically? I feel there's a lot of straw man arguments out there that I feel the need to deflect from time to time when I talk about silly little sitcoms, because I feel in the YouTube space or in the long form video essay space, I feel people can assume that I'm only making videos on these topics to nostalgia bait people, and in my comment section it really feels that way sometimes. I appreciate all the comments that I get from people saying oh, I remember this show from when I was little and stuff, but it does seem to be that's all the only way people want to engage in my videos in, and I guess I shouldn't really complain. But at the end of the day, I have a deeper reason and analytical purpose for picking these specific shows. Good Luck Charlie, because it really sparked so many thoughts and opinions. And I mean, if I watched any other family sitcom, All in the Family or something, I bet it would spark similar thoughts. Honestly, I should watch that show, because that premise was crazy. Archie Bunker is your classic grouchy, conservative asshole type, but then he wakes up to the realities of the world throughout the series. He gets woke, if you will. What was that quote from cracked.com? Something about like Archie Bunker's wife was the only thing keeping him one step away from a Klan meeting or something like that. Anyways.
I mean, look at All in the Family. The only thing between Archie Bunker and a Klan rally was Edith.
Happy Days, Partridge Family, Good Times. Yeah, that checks out.
We're hot on the trail of this mom murderer, and you want to close the book so we can talk about bones? F you.
Yeah, clearly those shows haven't affected any of us. You were saying, Dan?
Disappearing moms.
If I were engaging in those types of shows currently in my everyday life, maybe I'd make videos about those shows. And you know what? Give me a year or two, because I'm trying to work my way backwards, honestly, when it comes to like sitcom history. And I've just started with Disney Channel because of my obvious nostalgia window of the 2000s and 2010s. But once I actually do work my way backwards and make it to like the 80s and then the 70s, we'll talk about those shows if y'all will be interested in that stuff. But yes, Good Luck Charlie specifically sparked a lot of thoughts and opinions on, like I said, specifically things to do with like late stage sitcoms, or at least what I have an opinion of being late stage sitcoms. Some may say that the sitcom is not dead, but according to the title of this YouTube video, I think they are. We'll get more into it eventually, because I want to actually talk about the show first, before I get into my pedantic ranting. My pontification, if you will. So the reason why I want to talk about Good Luck Charlie, because so many people probably just perceive it as this extremely milquetoast and boring show, which is a fine opinion to have. It very much is at the end of the day, but that boringness is what intrigues me. Famously, I've said on this channel that like I'm always a big fan, or I find the 6 out of 10s of the world to be extremely fascinating to talk about. Because what do we understand as bland or boring or basic? Like, what does it say about our society? What the basic thing is say about our society is what I'm trying to get at. And I think that this show is a good place to start, at least. We're starting at the end of the story. Not even in medias res. We're starting at the end. I mean, a lot of people also think sitcoms are boring and lame. That's something I am kind of upset about. A lot of people who make videos about the same topics that I do, these like Disney Channel sitcoms, they all clearly don't seem to like sitcoms all that much, in my opinion. They don't like the format or the structure or the acting style or the set design, which, to be fair, is like intentionally slapdash and a bit rudimentary. So like it's not like it's groundbreaking stuff, but that is what the genre is at the end of the day. And I feel like people analyze and critique these shows, these sitcoms, in the same way they do like all of these prestige, era television shows like White Lotus and shit. And it's like, they're completely different genres. It's kind of like that whole thing about animation, that whole rant about animation, where it's like, it's not a genre of film, it's a medium. Like, these are all television, but it doesn't make any sense to compare any of them whatsoever and to expect the same things from these shows. Since media like this, like the sitcom, what we're talking about right now, basically doesn't exist anymore, at least in popular media, in the cultural zeitgeist at this moment, for people who didn't watch them like from the very beginning or don't watch them currently, it's an acquired taste is all I'm trying to say. And it's okay that people don't like sitcoms. I was talking with my brother about this actually. I think I was watching reruns of the Beverly Hillbillies and he was like, this sucks. I don't like sitcoms. And I'm just like, fine, that's okay. I'm not gonna get mad or offended or anything. But I do get mad and a little bit offended, just a little bit, when creators make videos about these shows and they talk about how bad they are, but it's just like the elements that are like inherent to the sitcom genre. And it's like, if you just don't like sitcoms, that's fine. Don't review the show then. Like, I'm not going to review movies in genres that I just don't like. Like, I'm not a huge fantasy person, if that wasn't already obvious. So, like, I'm never going to make a video about Game of Thrones or whatever because it has nothing to do with my interests, and so I'm probably not going to have a very interesting take on it. And I feel like so many of these creators don't, but, like, this is just what they do. They just, like, bait the nostalgia market and make videos on things that people remember, and then everyone just goes, I remember thing, and they cash off of that. It just feels like, disinteresting, lazy, and offensive to the medium as a whole. And again, sitcoms aren't like this highbrow piece of media, but I famously always have tried to be somebody who does analyze these trashy, lowbrow pieces of media. Because again, What does it mean to be lowbrow? What does it say about our society that the sitcom is lowbrow? I don't want to get too feminist about it or anything, but if I'm being completely honest with you, stuff that is usually made to be consumed by women, either young or middle-aged women, is usually what is considered to be lowbrow media. Or just stuff for kids in general. It's why so many people go like, why do you even need to talk about these children's sitcoms unless it has something really nasty or bad, like, you know, baked within the loaf, like all of Grossman Dan Schneider's stuff. Like, the only reason why we talk about those shows is because of the controversy. And I go, no. Outside of the controversy, which is it's hard to separate the two, but outside of it, there's still a lot of stuff in those shows to talk about. For me, at least, in my niche. But maybe not for everybody. And again, that's fine. So then just don't make the video about it. You can be quiet every once in a while, said the person who yaps for hours at a time on YouTube. So I honestly think that the reason why things like sitcoms and like daytime soap operas and stuff like that in general are considered to be such trashy media and are not given proper budgets and stuff is because of who their assumed audience is, which again is a lot of the time women. So in a lot of ways, it's like heavily degraded and shit on in popular media. To a degree, I don't even mind if a majority of people think sitcoms are bad, because it's just like not the place that we're in television history right now, and that is fine. I feel as though it's my goal in life to critically analyze these series because no one else really seems to, and I think to talk about the good and the bad, you know, not just the good, just because I like them, but also the problems, the, you know, undesirable elements, is to take them seriously. And I think taking pieces of media seriously validates them as, like, you know, proper pieces of media that deserve to exist. And I feel like media made for women does deserve to exist. Sorry, this was kind of a rant. I went off script like hours ago. So why am I talking about Good Luck Charlie? That's why. So now that we're done with that, let's talk about the Duncans. Let's talk about the family members, okay? Immediately, I want to highlight the extremely traditional values and family structure that this series has and uplifts through its rhetoric regarding how the audience is supposed to feel about the characters and the show's existence at the end of the day. In many ways, it represents a back-to-basics approach for Disney Channel. At the end of the day, I think the whole point of the show was to represent what the nuclear family actually was, and to reflect a more relatable and honest depiction of the family sitcom for American audiences. In my opinion, that's what the mess and the highlighting of the general trashiness of the family was supposed to reflect, but the show really loses that surface-level commentary over time as it goes on. You guys hear that? Holy shit. I don't think that's for any intentional or malicious reason. I just think the show stops representing anything after a certain point, but I'll speak more on this later. In an interview that dropped the day before the pilot aired, Chief Creative Officer for Disney Channel Worldwide, Gary Marsh, stated, "Most of our shows are driven by high concept ideas. That's been our stock and trade for quite some time. What we decided, to change it up a bit and dimensionalize the network, was to go for something very low concept, very traditional, where its characters have to drive the viewership." Something that I found very interesting about this article as well is that they mention how much of the staff that was working on Good Luck Charlie were veterans of the scene who had started working for Disney Channel after many traditional networks dropped the format altogether. To quote the article, Marsh said because most network television had abandoned the traditional sitcom, Disney has been able to snatch up a lot of experienced talent for behind the camera. This is something that was parroted 13 years later by the book Disney High, The Untold Story of the Rise and Fall of Disney Channel's Tween Empire by Ashley Spencer. This is a book I've been mentioning a lot recently, but I mean, it's been very, very necessary to the story of Disney Channel as a whole. A section of this book chalks up the success of Disney Channel in its heyday as a sort of lucky accident. I didn't write down the quote. I gotta get the fucking book. Where is it? Here it is. It's on my shelf, but on the very bottom for some reason. Wrote down the page number, but not the goddamn quote. Who the fuck do I think I am? Over just a few seasons, the slate of those network scripted comedies shrunk by nearly half. I'm sure the Disney executives just thought they became geniuses, but what really happened is they suddenly had access to network writers, directors, actors, crew, wardrobe, said Phil of the Future, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, and Jesse producer Adam Lapidus, who had previously written on Full House and Smart Guy. All of those people who are working network shows were all unemployed, so we all went to Disney Channel. A quote from writer Michael Carrington, who wrote for That's So Raven, he added, "The reason for the success of these shows, in my opinion, was because they were all veteran sitcom writers. We weren't children's writers. Because the network gave up on us, it was Disney Channel's game. They got lucky." This is why I highlight the importance of Disney Channel as a network that was carrying along the genre of the sitcom throughout the 2010s and arguably still to this day, which is another concept I'll delve further into a while from now. While I appreciate this quote because Marsh highlights the importance of character-driven storytelling and how focusing on that is something that audiences want at the end of the day, the use of the word traditional sparked a lot of interesting questions that I couldn't help but ask myself. I could, in an annoying way, speak on the blonde hair, blue-eyed nature of the family and spin a narrative of Disney Channel as this network that was trying to create some sort of eugenics psyop. And while the nature of white supremacy in the United States lends itself to seeing this image presentation that the Duncans have as the quote-unquote default and quote-unquote standard American family, that's not falling on deaf ears here. I think it speaks more to the silent way these structural systems move rather than an intentional piece of propagandist media. Is that what the show is at the end of the day? It could be argued. One huge criticism that I will lobby at my beloved sitcom is the fact that they usually represent all that is both negative and positive about the current cultural moment and zeitgeist that it was created within. Later on, I'll probably go on my Three's Company rant regarding how I think it's actually not as dumb as everyone says it is, at least in the very beginning of the show, but that doesn't mean that it's a perfect show that needs to be held up as the golden standard of modern television or anything. There is some extremely dated language and sentiments present within that show that a less understanding audience could totally adopt and believe as a societal norm, even when those things definitely shouldn't be. Things like casual usage of homophobic slurs and blatant borderline sexual harassment and misogyny. While these elements are not entirely representative of how the show operates on a basic level, the culture war freaks that infect everywhere on the internet would probably call it woke if it was made today. That doesn't change the fact that those elements are present within the show to begin with. Good Luck Charlie, while being on the opposite end of the sitcom genre spectrum, Three's Company is a raunchy sex comedy, and Good Luck Charlie is a family slice-of-life school comedy, it embodies many of the same problems that are weaved within its tapestry overall. You may not feel this anymore, but as a whole, the sitcom did the job of normalizing everything it represented within its three walls, telling the fourth one, aka us, that everything it showed us was just how things were in society. I talked about this further in my Benny Weir video and how he may be the reason why we have incels today, so go check that out for further supplemental reading that is inherently more queer in nature if you're interested in that. The problem with this is the inherent bias that's present within the creators and writers' room that seeps into the storytelling and distorts what quote-unquote normal is. Because everyone has a different definition of what normal is, which is why I feel the need to place quotation marks to begin with. Audio quotation marks, that is, an inflection in my voice, which I hope is conveying that within the audio remarks. Like I said, I don't see any malicious intention behind why the Duncans are seen as the standard, normal family, at least none beyond wanting to make them as WASP-coded as possible in presentation and presentation alone, mainly because the corpse of the family sitcom had already been picked clean in terms of societal commentary and reflection. So much so that there are only bones left that have also already been licked clean at this point. So playing it completely straight would betray the decades of work that had already been done to subvert the genre. To give y'all a bit of a history lesson here, around 40-ish years ago, shows like Married with Children and The Simpsons launched with the goal of flipping the family sitcom on its head, specifically through making everyone as nasty and as unloving as possible to each other. Since the family sitcoms of old held only love and reverence for each other with the occasional lighthearted joke that wasn't even all that offensive and was only thrown a character's way if they started it by being dumb or ridiculous in the first place. Think of The Waltons, Petticoat Junction, The Donna Reed Show, etc. Shows like Married with Children set the precedent that it's actually fun and entertaining when people are mean and hate each other for no discernible reason, and it trained a whole generation of writers and Doug Walker types that comedy can only be derived from the pain and humiliation of others, which is its own problematic topic for another day.
Peg, kids, time to torture me, I'm home. Let's hear the pitter-patter of little feet The thrusting of greedy little hands.
So, Good Luck Charlie is still a subversion of the family sitcom as a whole by the pure fact that the parents fuck up sometimes and that all the kids are a little bit mean to each other for quick laughs. If they decided to go full sap factory like a show like Full House did, then they would have had to add some sort of twist like Full House did, like a dead mom or chucking a couple orphans in there for good measure. That's because the illusion had already been shattered. We all already knew by that point that the Norman Rockwell painting the 1950s was trying to sell us in these shows was a huge sham, so we weren't going to be buying it anymore. Right? Sometimes I feel like I'm going insane here. Those same culture war freaks I referenced earlier are currently huffing that paint as we speak. It's quite sad to see. So in many ways, Good Luck Charlie is a Disney Channel version of that struggling family dynamic that was introduced to American audiences all those years ago, and still continue to exist even in the 21st century. Which reminds me, is it wrong of me to say that so much of this show feels inspired by Malcolm in the Middle? I posed a similar accusation to the Sweet Life on Deck with the show How I Met Your Mother, where I saw a lot of comparison points between character dynamics, specifically with Zach and Cody, late stage Zach and Cody, when they were in their late teens, and Barney Stinson and Ted Mosby. Them being foils of one another and their whole dynamic in that sense felt very reminiscent of How I Met Your Mother in The Sweet Life on Deck. And it's less of a direct comparison like that, but just in general, the aura of the show feels very inspired by Malcolm in the Middle to me. A lot of early season 1 feels like it's trying to capture that relatable, chaotic energy that Malcolm in the Middle had. Oh my gosh, something just fell from the wall and it scared the shit out of me. A lot of the early episodes in season 1 feels like it's trying to capture that relatable, chaotic energy of a working class family just trying to get by. There's an intent and curated messiness throughout the set, along with a lot of bright colors. It kind of contrasts the very stale, beige mom aesthetic. I think it was supposed to serve the function of endearing the audience to the family. Again, that sense of relatability. Something that's very interesting to note about Good Luck Charlie is that it is supposed to be an ensemble cast, with each of the characters supposedly getting equal amounts of screen time. Teddy is technically the main character because Bridget Mendler was the pop star that they were trying to push into the mainstream. She was too smart to fall into their trap, literally, as in PhD from Harvard or whatever. So she is the character that the audience tends to follow throughout the show more often than not. I mean, she literally starts every episode talking to us, the audience, aka Charlie, when she does her video vlogs. But her brothers, Gabe and PJ, as well as her parents, Bob and Amy, are also supposed to get just the same amount of character development, which again harkens back to the traditional origins of the sitcom. That dishwasher is loud AF. I mean, there are 2 other children, obviously Charlie and then later, spoiler alert, Toby, but they're babies, so they don't really get character development. Okay, here, if you need me to explain these characters to you, over time, Charlie kind of gets the personality trait of hating Toby. She hates the fact that she has a younger sibling, which is kind of the surface level original plot line that they had given to Gabe about Charlie. But before that, it was mainly just your standard baby jokes with the occasional aloofness to having to face responsibility. They set up in the final episodes of the series that Toby may be a troublemaker in a similar vein to Gabe, which is cute, but again, they don't really give him the same baby jokes and gags that they had given to Charlie. You know, stuff about picking things up and breaking them, chewing things, bringing things into the yard that aren't supposed to be in the yard, your classic stuff like that. And I guess I can understand why they don't do this with Toby, because they already did these plot lines with Charlie to an extent. But at the end of the day, it kind of can make it feel like Toby just isn't there sometimes, that he just isn't a member of the family. There were whole episodes where he is just not in the episode at all. And I think that was a lot more rare of a situation with Charlie, I think. Especially in the pilot, there are definitely some scenes where Charlie's obviously supposed to be there, but they just have a baby doll double, and then when they actually need her to be in the scenes, they just cut to her, you know? But her presence was still felt, even if she wasn't actually there, the actress wasn't physically there. Amy in season 1 was always covered in baby vomit or food that was thrown at her by Charlie. And she would have B-plots centered around her getting potty trained, or, like I said, throwing things and taking things into the yard and destroying them. But we get none of that with Toby. We get no Toby storylines pretty much. Again, like I said, I understand why maybe they didn't do that because they didn't want to tread on old ground. But if that's the case, then why did they write in the plot line of Amy having another kid in the first place? It's not like it's real life where real accidents like that happen. Like, they could have just not done that. It just makes me think that they only really did it to kind of have the shock of, you know, them having another kid, and also to write a bunch of pregnancy jokes for like a chunk of the season with Amy, because they basically missed out on doing any of those when she was pregnant with Charlie, because that was before the series started. To me, this show is one of the clearest examples of Flanderization in like all of Disney Channel sitcom history. Pretty much all of these shows had done this over time, but the thing about other series like Wizards and stuff was that like they were getting too caught up in the magic and the melodrama and the characters getting old that like they were able to kind of avoid it to a degree. Like, Max as a character is one who clearly could have gotten the most Flanderized out of all of them. However, because the actor became like a real teenager, it just didn't really make sense to be giving him the same material. So they kind of shifted his character over time in a similar way that they did to Gabe. So Gabe kind of avoids this fate as well. But the rest of these characters suffer the fate of Flanderization. If you don't know what that term means, it's from The Simpsons, from the character Ned Flanders. Generally, it's when a character has a trait, you know, a single trait out of many, and over time, the series just kind of focuses in on that specific trait, and before you know it, all the character is just that one trait. Like, they just become an extremely concentrated version of what they were at the very beginning. And it's a common thing that happens in a lot of shows, enough to where they literally made a name for it. And I mean, observing why that is could be its own video entirely. Some theories off the top of my head for why this happens could be that like the writers get a bit antsy, they get a bit like tired of these characters and just kind of write on autopilot mode, and they just pick something so they can just get another script out. Because that is a huge fault of the sitcom and this sort of style of creating a television show, is that they're basically made to go for forever and continue for forever. And if you don't keep the writer's room fresh, or if you don't like let the ideas flow a little bit more, which a lot of times these shows don't, and also you just give them really, really tight schedules and budgets to get things done, then it can be easy to just like go to the lowest common denominator and just kind of like just shit something out real quick. And so much of season 4 of this series really feels like that, and that is sad to say. So we'll break it down with each character. So we might as well go character by character now. And I think I'm going to go from oldest to youngest. It would make sense to start with Teddy, or to end with Teddy because she's the most popular or main character, but no, it's more satisfying for me to go by age. And then talk about the parents at the end, because even though they're the oldest. So something I find really interesting is how all of the siblings are portrayed, how like they're supposed to kind of be in the pilot, because obviously the pilot is usually shot months before the rest of the show is. So a lot of things change in between the pilot and then the rest of the first season. And then of course things evolve from there. So like both PJ and Gabe were the ones that I found to be the most interesting in terms of their characterization changing. Since we're talking about PJ, Mr. Potty John himself, in the pilot, I really pick up on the fact that he's supposed to be like the burnout, flighty one. Something I noticed is that in those early seasons, they're dressing him in a lot more darker colors, and he's, again, supposed to be a little bit more edgy in a sense. He's supposed to be a lot more like Roderick than he is Rowley, but over time he evolves more from the former to the latter. What I've always picked up from PJ was that he is somebody who is just very lost and confused in a world that specifically wants him to be so sure of himself and do something specifically. As much as we talk about eldest daughter syndrome, that's like the new TikTok buzzword character type or whatever people like to assign to themselves, I think like eldest sons also have a lot of pressure on them in a way that like the patriarchy also kind of rudimentally makes life worse for them. Obviously in a different way, because at the end of the day, they are men. But I feel like there's a large pressure on PJ to perform in a way that he just has no interest in doing, which is why he is supposed to be seen as sort of like the failure of the family. That was the energy I really picked up on in that first episode in the pilot. But he's not an outright idiot Yet, at least. He gives a pep talk to his parents. Like, his earnestness and his sincerity over everything else is what, like, provided value to the family at the end of the day, from his character. Like, we see him just being open and honest, being like, I know it's gonna be hard to have 4 kids and still have both of you working, but, like, we're all gonna help, and if we screw up Charlie in the process, at least we share all the blame. Like, I thought that was a very cute moment for him to have in the pilot episode. His honesty, directionlessness, and somewhat lack of smarts eventually just leads to him plainly being the dumb one, which is a classic Disney Channel trope that can get very, very annoying and tiring over time. And as much as Jason Dolley is just like one of the best performers in all of Disney Channel history, he's up there with Brenda Song. And I bring up Brenda Song specifically because she also played a classic Disney Channel dumb character. Both of their performances are absolutely selling these characters in a way that if someone with less talent were to be playing them, it would get very annoying very quick. So in a lot of ways, it feels like a little bit of a shame that we don't get much depth from him. A storyline that does provide a little bit more depth for him is his relationship with Skylar, which is his main, like, romantic arc throughout the series. I feel like whenever they wanted to default to give PJ something to do in an episode, it pretty much had to revolve around the fact that he wanted to date girls or whatever. My opinion on PJ and his relationship to women and dating them throughout the show has actually changed quite a bit from what I initially thought at the beginning of me scripting this video. Originally, I felt a layer of artifice, as in he was sort of enacting the rituals that people expect of him to fulfill in society by constantly, you know, going after attractive women. However, I don't think that's the case. I definitely think the character likes girls. Really what it was is that PJ's naivete and his reliance on basic impulses is what I think is causing him to see a pretty girl and immediately think he has to be with her, and envisioning like this beautiful, big, grand romance and life with her until they die and when they get married and have kids and everything. But I do think his expectations definitely shift what actual reality is, which is why he doesn't have any long-term relationships until he's with Skylar. They're just so cute and adorable together throughout the whole show. I find it very, very charming and endearing, their entire relationship. It is just done so earnestly because considering the characters are seen as being so naive, they, in a lot of ways, and when I use the word naive, I guess I mean dumb, if I were to use the language that the show would probably assign to them, because they're not the brightest of people, they have no ulterior motives or like intentions in their relationship. Outside of the New York arc, which I'll get to in a little bit. They just complement each other well and have similar shared interest in spending time with one another and are just a cute, simple, warming couple overall. But his relationship with Skylar felt very, very sincere and I think was written and done very, very well. Her character originates from the fact that she was the other woman from Spencer who was dating Teddy, obviously. So something that we really pick up from her character, which is just very, very small characterization, which I still think like fuels their relationship really well, is that she clearly tends to go for very volatile men who don't really treat her that well. Another plot line we get from their relationship is the fact that like her ex is a very like angry, violent person and wants to beat up PJ for being her current boyfriend. And we find out that the guy is like quite small and short and scrawny. He's like a power runner. He's a lot like Ozzy and Zeke and Luther. So like PJ doesn't have to worry about actually getting beat up by this guy. But yeah, we still learn that like she dates guys who kind of treat her like shit, because like Spencer is literally cheating on her with Teddy. And so in a lot of ways, PJ is supposed to be seen as like the good, honest, sincere person in her life. So it really fuels their relationship to succeed. So obviously the biggest drama that they face in their relationship is the fact that Skylar ends up moving to New York. Now, this whole plot line, back when it first aired and I first watched it on TV, I thought it was a much bigger deal than it ended up being. This is actually a small little critique that I have of this show, was that they tended to do storylines that probably had a lot more like juice in them for like multiple episode arcs, end up just getting like the one episode treatment, and were so interesting and cool to like a little, you know, tiny 13-year-old me or whatever. 13? How old was I? 9. I was 9 when this show started airing, yeah. These plot lines were so interesting to little 9-year-old me that, like, I thought that they were much bigger deals within the series than they actually ended up being, as in they took much more time. So the plot line where Skylar moves to New York, and so PJ decides to follow her and runs away from home at age like 17 or something to go live with Skylar, and so they can be together. Like, I thought that was a multi-episode storyline, but it actually all was contained within one single episode. Again, if this show was a lot more slower paced and was in more of the like a dramedy style format, like Gilmore Girls or something, then I think it would have like definitely dragged out that storyline just a little bit more, maybe. Disney Channel basically never extends plot lines like that unless they're doing a like intentional specific 2-parter, or in the rare occasional case 3-parter. They will do like status quo shifts and changes, like the introduction of Toby, or eventually I think in season 3 or season 4 when PJ moves out and moves into an apartment. So he has like his own little world and set that he exists within throughout the show during that time period. But outside of that, like I said, arcs like this they won't spend more than an episode on, which I think is wrong at the end of the day. Again, one of the really beautiful things about PJ as a character is that he's very emotional and just very honest about his emotions. This can be seen through the fact that he's not the smartest, so he doesn't really understand that he shouldn't be doing that as a guy or whatever. But it just leads to his character just being very honest and open in a way that is just very satisfying and makes him just like a very fun character to watch. Like you're never like super like upset with what PJ does. He's always in the series' good graces, even when he does incredibly volatile things like this, like running away to New York. Again, his whole thought process doesn't really go beyond the surface level. He's like, I like Skylar, I want to be with Skylar. Skylar is over there. I'm just gonna go over there to be with Skylar. No thoughts of how he's gonna attend school, if he's dropping out of school, what he was gonna do for a job. We see that he's literally just playing the guitar in the subway station. Like, Mans is not cut out for this world of New York City specifically. So Bob has to go and fetch him to go bring him back. And so they break up and he gets sent back to Denver. And we still feel the consequences of this situation throughout the series. Luckily, it's not like they hit the big reset button. That was another thing I always appreciated about this show. Even if they don't extend like plot lines across multiple episodes, they will extend a character's emotional state and situation across multiple episodes. So like PJ is emotionally affected by his breakup with Skylar. And it does get brought up very, very fleetingly, of course, but it does get brought up, throughout the rest of the series. Check out Caitlin McKillop's video if you haven't yet about this relationship, about the PJ Skylar relationship. Caitlin McKillop was one of my favorite YouTubers, huge inspiration to me to start my own channel. Just great stuff in general overall. Like, if there's anyone who could school me in Disney Channel, it's her. She made a really great video about describing the arc of their relationship and sort of like the relationship dynamic that they have. It's a great video overall. And just like a lot of stuff that they do with season 4, they kind of wrap things up in a little bit too simplistic of a format and method, just to kind of like tie up a bunch of loose ends and just get, chug the series along to the finish line. So this arc gets concluded in season 4 very, very succinctly. It's the Jesse 2-parter crossover that they do where everything gets concluded. In the first part, they get stuck on the subway. The reason why they're in New York is because Teddy wants to do a tour of NYU. And so her and PJ go to New York City to like, is NYU in New York City? They go to New York, the state, to take a tour of NYU, but they get stuck on the subway because it breaks down or whatever, and they talk with the characters from Jesse, aka 2 of them, because only 2 of them signed on to the episode. And then I think in part 2, the Jesse characters aren't even there, but in part 2, they're still in New York, and PJ runs into Skylar again. It has to be New York City, because there's no way that they would just run into each other. Well, the show likes to do stuff like this, by the way. This is kind of their bread and butter, like coincidences like this. But anyways, they run into each other and we find out that Skylar she's the same age as Teddy, so she's also graduating high school at the same time as her, and she's going to the University of Denver for school, so yay, they can be together. Because after meeting up, for the first time, after years of not seeing each other, they try to be friends and they admit their feelings to one another, that they still love each other, even though they live on the opposite sides of the country. Storyline over, and then we literally never see her again until the finale, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think it's the finale is the last time we see her. So they're just back together now. I see a spring wedding in their future. Good for them. Every time that the characters interact with each other, the emotional scenes are done really, really well. Like the moment when they have to leave each other is executed good, and the moment where they like see each other again for the first time in Central Park or wherever they are is also done really good. And the beauty of sitcoms like this is the whole point, at least, is supposed to be that like we spend a lot of time with these characters, and so we really get to know like the granular like interactions that all of these characters have with each other. So because of that, I would have liked to have seen more of PJ and Skylar together in that final part of the season, if they were going to at least give them a few episodes where they're technically together. But you know how this show goes. They already have such a large cast. They don't want to pay for another person, especially because they were still dragging along all the Spencer bullshit. Out of these two characters' romantic relationships, the whole Teddy Spencer thing and the PJ Skylar thing, I would have 1000% much more preferred to see more screen time given to PJ and Skylar. But that's just my opinion. PJ also is seen like discovering what his intentions and interests are throughout the show, basically finding himself and what he wants to do with his life. Because he's the oldest, he kind of already has to face all of these consequences, which is something he is not ready for. Like I said, he does get an apartment later on. Him and Emmett, his like best friend character, they move in together. Something I thought was really funny in like a sad kind of way, obviously, but it was still pretty funny, was the fact that like Emmett doesn't even have a job, I'm pretty sure, but his parents like are paying his half of the rent and paying basically to get him out of their house because they hate him so much or whatever. That's a bit that these shows really like to do. And PJ is supposed to be going to community college after he graduates high school, and I'm pretty sure at this point still working at Quickie Chicken, aka he's delivering chicken to people's houses at a fried chicken spot, you know? And then I think he gets a job at the mall spraying perfume at people. They don't do that anymore, do they? That's not like a thing anymore. Like, you're not supposed to like assault people with perfume sprays, and that's like a plot line in a lot of sitcoms. Like that episode of Friends where Joey is dressed up as a cowboy and he like is supposed to like spray perfume at people dressed as a cowboy, and there's a rival cowboy, and so they get like into a perfume off. Weird stuff. He starts at Quickie Chickie, and they actually do a lot of good plot lines with him working at that fried chicken place. And then they move on to him being a perfume sprayer. But outside of all of that, his interests in music were kind of where they originally started his character. He has a band with Emmett. They're like a White Stripes style guitarist drummer duo. Or 21 Pilots, if that's the more like modern comparison. They eventually do drop his musician plot lines. He's like basically, there's a whole episode they give him where he is expressing the feeling that he wants to be a musician as a living, and Bob is like, no. You can't just be a musician. You know, that classic friction. They kind of paired up these two characters a lot early on in the first season. And over time, I feel like their dynamic kind of got stretched out a bit or like kind of separated. And then they tried to reorient this dynamic back like very last minute for the finale in a way that I don't really think worked too well. I'll talk about that eventually. But just know that like these two characters were kind of supposed to have a dynamic a lot of the time that, you know, they just drop at a certain point, probably just for other stuff. And I also wonder if they dropped his musician arc because they maybe wanted to focus more on giving Bridget Mendler, so like Teddy's character, more music stuff, because I mean, she was the one writing and releasing an album at that time, which is an absolute banger, by the way. That album fucking slaps. Hello, My Name is like a platinum album in my household, okay? Ranked high among like the Disney Channel albums from that like kind of early, you know, era. Because what else is there? Like the Sabrina Carpenter record. I don't think Debbie Ryan released anything under Disney Channel. Zendaya? Yeah. Bridget Mendler clears all of those albums. No offense to Sabrina Carpenter, but I mean, come on here. Y'all heard the music, haven't you? So eventually over time, PJ is given an interest in the culinary world. I thought that this was a very clever choice, and maybe also stolen from Malcolm in the Middle now that I think about it. But yeah, giving PJ an interest in food and the culinary world was a wonderful choice, and it was really, really nice to see his character go in that direction over time. He eventually drops out of community college and starts going to culinary school, which I think he also drops out of. That feels very PJ in general to do. I just realized that I'm wearing my Invader Zim t-shirt, and I meant to change into something Disney Channel themed. This is the wrong network. Also, I realized that my cup has been looking grody on camera. That's because it's actually a hot chocolate, but instead of like water or milk as the liquid, I put coffee, cause we're doing this late, buddy. And so it had like hot chocolate crud all over it, and so I tried to wipe it off to make it more appealing looking on camera. But look, it's my Snoopy #1 dad mug. Isn't that adorable? It's been so long. I stopped to eat a waffle and check Twitter and get rage baited by 5 sauce stuff. This is why I'm gonna stop using Twitter, because it was so much fun. When there's something happening and something to talk about, it's so much fun, and then people get stupid. And so I have to move on. So PJ dropping out of community college and then going to culinary school was a very welcomed kind of vibe shift for him, because they had done some decent plot lines revolving, you know, him getting an apartment with, my gosh, Emmett. Y'all, the coffee needs to be hitting a bit stronger. And something that gets a little bit frustrating, somewhat at least, over time throughout the show is that he's seen constantly at the Duncan household, which of course makes sense because it's like, that's where a lot of the action is gonna happen, and by like exclusively having PJ in his apartment, you cut him out of a large chunk of plot lines where like he kind of needs to be there, or just scenes in general where he could be commentating on things. That's kind of a thing that this show does, where like a plot line will be happening in an episode that like a character has nothing to do with. They have their own B-plot stuff, but they'll still just be like in the room making quips, and of course it makes sense because they all share the house together. A decent enough excuse that they kind of do, and they don't say this out loud, but it's just something I picked up from how they set dress things, is that he's there to like take care of Charlie or eventually Toby. Like, it makes sense that he'd be hanging out at his parents' home quite often, and he's still there helping out with the younger siblings when he can. Apparently this is a thing that a lot of kids when they like first move out do. Like, a lot of my friends were like constantly at their parents' house, and I'm like, I thought the whole point of you getting your own place was that you didn't have to you didn't have to be with your parents. That's a horrible way to look at it. I guess I can't relate because when I moved out, I moved to a completely different town. So I lived hours away from my father. So like I couldn't just like pop over to his house whenever I felt like it. I can only visit him at like exclusive specific times. Like right now. So his culinary school arcs were very fun. I really liked the culinary like episodes that they gave him. Eventually he does stop going to culinary school, I think just because he doesn't feel like emotionally fulfilled by it. This was something that we really picked up from PJ. They made light jokes at the fact that, oh, he wasn't going to graduate high school because, you know, he's dumb or whatever. But what I had always picked up on was it seems like when he doesn't feel like fulfilled in a specific way from something, he just decides to move on to something that will fulfill that for him. So like I said, schoolwork and stuff wasn't really interesting to him. It was more of like playing in his band, PJ and the Vibes, which, you know, was the name of the band that he had with Emmett. And then when it comes to culinary school, he doesn't find it as enriching because I think he's like exclusively picked out to be like the one kid that the professor like bullies, basically. Like there's a whole thing where he's like, oh man, I'm like the bad student that like gets harassed by the teacher every single day. And they make the teacher like a Gordon Ramsay type figure, you know? Because his whole shtick was very appealing to Americans. Americans really like an angry British man for some reason. I don't know why we're like this. And so this leads to PJ basically lucking his way into like a stable financial situation. Like I said, he's a perfume sprayer, but then he meets up with one of his old college buddies, Gravy. Gravy was one of my favorite like PJ related characters. He only really showed up twice, I think, in the show, which is when he was introduced, and then for this plot line to kind of wrap up the series. When PJ's working at Quickie Chickie, he decides to go to like a 2-day like weekend extra program to like become a manager or like rise the ranks of the facility. He basically decides that he wants to do more with his life and not just become like the manager of a chicken restaurant, which is a good job, you know. It is. But while he's at this 2-day weekend program, he meets Gravy, who was like also there for the same reason. And they do the little bit where they run through the entire college experience in just that weekend, 48 hours. And the whole joke is that they've become bonded as like these lifelong best friends, even though they've only known each other again for 2 days. He then appears again in season 4, near the season 4 finale. And it's specifically set up that like he doesn't have a place to stay or something, so he ends up living with the Duncans. They do some bits surrounding that, of course. And then we learn that he comes from a very rich family, so he just kind of like does whatever he wants and just kind of floats through life. He doesn't have the same like stakes that PJ does, which is why he's just kind of like doing whatever. And his parents buy him a food truck because his goal is to sell like fish and gravy, because his name is Gravy, right? So he wants to sell a fish gravy food truck. And so he asks PJ if they can like double venture and do it together. And PJ's like, of course, that sounds awesome. But then they realize that the food sucks. That fish gravy, like or fish covered in gravy, is gross and no one likes it. And so Gravy immediately quits and runs off and says, "You can have the food truck, man. I'm just gonna tell my dad to buy me something else," and just like dips. So now PJ is in the ownership of a food truck and has to figure out how to like make it a fulfilling venture for him. And this is where his dynamic with Bob really comes back into play. So early on in the series, they were drawing a lot of comparisons and parallels between PJ and Bob. Early on, it was mainly for jokes because like they have Jason Dolley play a younger version of Bob in like an old VHS cam footage of him as a high schooler, and he has long hair, and the actor playing Bob was balding. So the whole joke was that like, oh no, PJ's all insecure that he's gonna go bald soon because he's like very vain about his hair. But I think they expanded this more when it came to like their character's dynamic. They also included the fact that like Bob used to be in a band when he was in high school. And that's something they can kind of relate to. I think they let Bob be the lead singer for their band for a performance they do one day. There's a lot of stuff for the parents in general where like the kids kind of indulge in them and create a bonding experience by like letting them be a little bit immature every once in a while. That was something I always found interesting about the parents, is that they're not the best at managing their emotions around their kids and being the bigger person. Because usually when you're a parent, that's like kind of the role you're supposed to fulfill. You're supposed to, again, be the bigger, more mature person because you're the adult in the room. A lot of that time that doesn't happen. And even though that's probably not the best thing, it is the more realistic thing. But them kind of wanting to bond with each other and having things in common, and PJ maybe just like having to grow at a mature level to really understand that he does want to like be with his father in that way. How that storyline is concluded is with the food truck. I have to like breathe when I talk. Sometimes I like run out of breath because I'm talking so much and not breathing enough. So what happens is that when PJ gets this food truck, he wants to turn it into a peanut butter and jelly stand, which was very trendy at the time, like niche food trucks. The whole like food truck boom had just happened. I remember there was somebody who I was friends with whose mom ran a grilled cheese food truck, which was delicious. Her grilled cheeses were amazing. And during it, Bob is basically wanting to like open the food truck with PJ, and PJ isn't really connecting with like as to why, and he's like basically like no. And it takes Bob to basically tell him like, I want to do something with you. I want to like bond with you over something, and this is an opportunity to do that, to like work together as father and son. And so they decide to open B and PJ's PB&J's, which is an adorable name for the food truck, I will say. But yeah, they make it like an emotional bonding thing for them, and that's like that setting of them selling PB&J's outside of the truck is like the final scene of the series. I just realized to non-Americans, peanut butter and jelly probably sounds like weird. Like that's not like a common flavor combo. everywhere else, is it? So I'm glad that at the end of the day, his conclusion was with something food related, because they had done a really good job of developing that passion and interest of his. I think the Thanksgiving episode is kind of fun because of that. They have some quips about Bob's mom hating Amy, which they had done in the Christmas movie with Amy's mom hating Bob. And PJ gets the fun little like runner gag and B-plot of having to fix the Thanksgiving dinner because Amy is, they joke that Amy's a bad cook a lot of the time. How his interest in food is started is when Amy is working, and so PJ is like, just starts making dinner for everybody, and they're like, this is really good. It's better than the stuff that our mom makes for us. And that's where he like really starts to grow and blossom his interest. And then before you know it, it's just like, he's just like into food. It's just like his thing, you know? It just slowly grows in the background. So I like that like he was trying to fix the Thanksgiving dinner. That's something that's really relatable to me. Overall, I really like PJ, like I said. As we get to the younger siblings, I feel like I'm gonna have less and less to say. I just always get nervous when I talk a lot about a character, and then I'm like, do I have this much to say about the other ones? Let's hope so. Next, we're gonna talk about Teddy. She is the main character, so I should have plenty of material for her. So the big character traits that we're supposed to kind of pick up on from Teddy is that she is like the average all-American girl. She is very, you know, girly. She's into boys, and also she's like popular. This is kind of an element of her character that again does get dropped over time in favor for other, you know, concentrated factors. Like I said with PJ, he has all of these different unique traits that all just get like boiled away. They turn into mist in the air, and he gets boiled down to just being the dumb one. And with Teddy, a lot of her interesting traits kind of, you know, disappear, and she ends up just becoming like the neurotic, you know, main character getting into wacky situations person. She's supposed to be very smart, good at school. That's a big factor of hers. That's kind of what they focus more on than the fact that like she's supposed to be a popular girl. We see this when she interacts with another girl who works at the grocery store, who is like a peer of hers, who she finds out that all the people she hangs out with are all secretly making fun of her. Teddy is like shocked to learn that she's been basically calling this girl an insult without even realizing it, because everyone around her was just so mean and rude and was just like naturally doing that, you know? Just realized that my microphone wasn't recording that whole time. So yeah, like her and Ivy are supposed to be like the popular kids in school. You know, whether or not Teddy is the most popular person or whatever, doesn't really matter. But like her whole thing was that, again, she was supposed to be like a very popular, like well-known and well-revered person in her school, which is why it makes sense for her to be dating Spencer, who is the most popular guy in their school. And then PJ is supposed to be seen as like the weird guy. I think there was a bit in the pilot where Spencer is like, he hears PJ from downstairs and he goes, that weird PJ kid from school sounds like he lives next door. And Teddy's like, he doesn't live next door. He lives here. He's my brother. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. But she's like, no, I know he's weird. So she's supposed to be seen as like the classic all-American popular girl in that framework. I can see why they kind of dropped this element of her character over time. It's to focus more on the fact that she's smart and kind, because those are the most, you know, important defining character traits of hers. Like I said, that girl that they were making fun of, she ends up actually becoming a good friend of hers. Like Teddy's supposed to be going to a party during that episode, but because Charlie accidentally shoplifted, they're like trapped. They're like locked into the back room of the grocery store, which is where they meet the girl. And Teddy is like, I want to leave because I have to go to this party. And she ends up inviting the girl who worked at the grocery store with her to the party. You know, just because they ended up talking and hanging out during that time when she was stuck at the grocery store, and you know, she's nice and she's nice to her. And then that girl comes back later as like a friend character for her. So we see that like, even though she's popular, she's not mean or like rude to people. She's just inherently a very kind and nice person. And she's willing to stick up for people who need advocating for, like that girl. And another guy that ends up becoming more like common in her rogues gallery is Victor. Victor is like this nerdy, semi-autistic coded character. He's basically supposed to be a Sheldon type from The Big Bang Theory. That was like a thing. There was a lot of like little Sheldons walking around in sitcoms during this time. Sounds like hell for a lot of people, but like, I kind of like his presence in the show. His whole thing is that he doesn't really pick up on sarcasm, and he's very blunt and just like straightforward and honest with people. Again, like I said, very Sheldon Cooper-esque. And so it works well for Teddy because it kind of pulls her down a peg. There wasn't really many characters to like call her out on things other than her parents, because especially by this point in the show, she really starts to grow an ego on her. This was something that I found very interesting when it came to the two oldest siblings. They really draw parallels between PJ and Bob, and that how they like are similar people. And later on in the show, also in the beginning as well, but like especially later on in the show, they really draw these parallels that like Amy and Teddy are similar in a lot of ways. Specifically when it comes to their love of the spotlight and performing, and like a little bit of that egotism that comes from that. Because like I said, they really ramp up Teddy's interest in singing and performing as the series goes on. And I'll talk about it more, don't you worry. When it comes to Amy, one of her defining character traits is that she is extremely selfish and like wants the spotlight on her, and is very like egocentric in that sense. Like she believes that she deserves to be a star, and that one day she'll have her big break and she'll be big and famous. I think it's a little bit of like a parody, almost like a Miss Piggy type, you know, of people who are like obsessed with their with being like this high class glamorous star, but they're actually just like a normal hometown person. And as nice as Teddy is, she also has a bit of vitriol in her. Like she will get back at somebody if she is wronged by them. She wants revenge. Again, another element of her character that is similar to Amy. With PJ, you really picked up on the idea that like he didn't want to disappoint his father. He never wanted to be seen as a disappointment in Bob's eyes, which is why he kind of matured and conceded to a lot of what Bob wanted to do at the end of the day. And with Teddy, it feels a little bit more like she has sympathy for her mother and kind of feels bad for her mother for not getting what she wants. And again, conceding to it at the end of the day. The episode where Teddy is basically forced into being the school mascot because her mom was, and her mom wants to live vicariously through her daughter doing it. Wow, this is a very common thing that people do to their kids. It's kind of horrible. Is a huge example of this. Teddy just doesn't feel comfortable with making her mom sad and upset over not wanting to be the mascot, because it was an extremely big deal to Amy at the time. And the reason why Teddy doesn't want to do it at the end of the day is because she's popular, and it's seen as the thing that only losers and nerds do. And because she's popular, she's like, everyone's going to make fun of me. So the lesson at the end of the day is not, Amy, you should maybe listen to your kid and notice when your kid is maybe not interested in something, because Teddy, while feigning that she has interest, is obviously like not interested and doesn't want to do it. So like someone with emotional intelligence would recognize that happening in their kid and back off. Well, that should have maybe been the lesson. What the lesson actually is that Teddy, you shouldn't care what other people think and say about you. You should just do this thing for your mom because you love her and you care about her, and that matters more than what other people say. And while I agree that's true, I also think Amy could have done things better as a parent in that setting, in that situation. But like I said, we'll talk more about Amy later. Teddy is smart enough to get into Yale, which is what her conclusion is at the end of the day for the series. Again, it makes sense why they would focus more on her smarts, because they probably had that in mind from the very beginning. But at the end of the day, what I think they focus more on in the finale, which really rubs me the wrong way and makes me mad, is, of course, her relationship with Spencer. Teddy has the most romantic arcs throughout the show. It is one of the defining elements of her character, which is fine. That's not a bad thing. She has enough going on outside of her boyfriends that it doesn't feel like, you know, it's all her character is defined by. But when it comes to Spencer specifically, it's a lot. It's a lot to get into. So early on, her and Spencer have a decent slow burn buildup. In the pilot, the whole like premise is that Teddy wants to kiss Spencer and Spencer clearly wants to kiss her. Like they have this study date that is clearly just a ruse for them to hang out and kiss. But then it doesn't happen because of Teddy's chaotic family life and the whole situation, right? So then later they go to a school dance together and wacky shenanigans happen, but of course they do end up kissing. Good for them. And then they end up officially dating. They do develop Spencer's character somewhat. We learn that he's a musician. Apparently he's supposed to be like a really good musician because he gets into Juilliard. I think he goes to Juilliard. But he is also very wealthy. His parents are very wealthy and he's a single child. So a common thing that keeps happening with Teddy is that she invites him over because she can't leave the house because she has to take care of her siblings, but she's embarrassed by how her younger siblings act, and so she is like feels insecure about having him around them, and so she's like, can we please hang out at your house? And she finds like a momentary sanctuary in Spencer's house because, again, he's an only child and his parents are rich and like high class or whatever, so they serve like fancy snacks, and it really makes like Teddy reflect on her like family's middle class, working class family dynamic and structure. But then, Spencer tells her, like, I like hanging out at your house because my house is boring and my parents are snobs. We specifically see that her family is featured on TV, which I think Teddy knows about it, but she opts out because, again, she's like on this whole like, oh, they're gross and weird, my family, I don't want to be associated with them. And I mean, they do embarrass themselves on national TV. It's actually a really, really funny setup. And we see that, like, yeah, his parents are very judgmental and snobbish and snooty, and he is offended that they make fun of her family. So we see that he is a good guy at the end of the day, and he actually does really like Teddy's family, which was something that was very endearing, because I could see a normal teenage boy being like, I don't want to hang out with your weird younger brother and your toddler baby sister who pukes everywhere and throws things at me. Like, I could see an average, like, 16 or 17-year-old boy not wanting to do that. But he likes Teddy enough and to like her whole family and like hanging out there. And he says, like, can we not hang out at my parents' house anymore? They're going to demolish this set later and build a park or something for an episode of Jessie. So we can't be hanging out at my parents' house set anymore. So can we exclusively hang out at your house, the only established set in the series? But then, of course, all is revealed. This was something that changed people's lives for forever, and I think was a very intentional plotline done, not only for drama, which, was probably a huge factor as to why they did it, but also because it was supposed to be used as a huge teaching, learning lesson for the audience at home. We eventually learn that Spencer had a secret second girlfriend. So all of that ranting, all of that blah, blah, blah I was saying about him being a stand-up guy and loving Teddy and loving being around her family or whatever, not enough to be exclusive, apparently. She immediately breaks up with him, and eventually, because of Ivy, we'll talk about Ivy after her romance storylines because, I love her so much. And she ends up, because of Ivy, becoming friends with Skylar, who was the other girl. And of course, Skylar ends up hanging out with Teddy so much that she ends up having a thing with PJ, and they're like endgame in the series. They don't really dive too much into Spencer's mentality as to why he did this. We just know that he did it. And then later on, he grovels and asks for her back. And it's basically completely ignored as to why they broke up in the first place, which was that he was a dog. He was a cheating dog. I kept ranting about this to my aunt, by the way. I kept being like, I can't believe she thinks about taking him back in the season 2 finale or season 1 finale. I can't remember exactly. I think it was the season 1 finale. Yes, it was. The season 1 finale, she like considers taking him back, and then she just decides no, that she just wants to stay single. But I was like, why is she even thinking about it? He's an asshole. But if it wasn't obvious based on the way that I described Spencer before I mentioned his whole cheating arc, it clearly has nothing to do with Teddy and the fact that, like, she wasn't providing for him or whatever enough, so he needed to go elsewhere. He was clearly very happy and satisfied with their relationship. It in my opinion, has to do with maybe the character's ego. They had already previously established that his character was fully willing to lie for personal gain to his girlfriend. In the titular talent show episode earlier on, they're supposed to do like a duo dance singing performance together. Canonically, Teddy can't dance for shit. She really can't. Throughout the entire series, it's been established that, like, outside of like very simple choreography, she cannot dance. She ain't got that dance gene in her. And I guess the actor who played Spencer was good at dancing or whatever. They have him do some dancing every once in a while. He also can sing, so that's why his character is like a musician and stuff. And he has a hard time telling her that she can't dance. To be fair, this is an awkward situation. They're still like kind of newly together. They haven't been together for that long because this is before the cheating scandal, and the cheating scandal's in like midway through season 1. So, you know, they've only been together for a little bit, and I don't think he finds out that she can't dance until after they've already agreed to do the talent show together. So, like, if he had known her better, he could have just not done this with her to avoid the whole awkwardness of having to tell her, hey, you suck at dancing. But he agrees to do the thing with her, the performance, and then sees that she sucks at dancing. And instead of just telling her or just saying he doesn't want to do it anymore and getting cold feet or whatever, he lies and says that he broke his ankle or like that he hurt his leg, so he can't do it anymore. And so she's like all sympathetic and nice to him. And then Ivy finds out and she gets pissed about it. And then obviously eventually Teddy finds out and she's extremely offended and heartbroken over it. But then they get over it, you know. It concludes at the end of the episode and it's all water under the bridge. But like, again, to me, this is proof that like he will lie for personal gain. This was like the big hint. So like I said, eventually later on, we see that he wants to get back together with her and she turns him down, which was a good thing. But then they drag him back up again in season 3, and they actually do get back together this time, which that pissed me off, can I just say. They just didn't do a good job of convincing me that he was a good fit for her after the whole drama and everything. I think what they just chalk it up to at the end of the day is that they still have chemistry and they still have feelings for each other. So they're just gonna get back together. And clearly she's like anxious and afraid to like tell her family about the fact that they're back together, for obvious reasons. But yeah, in my opinion, Spencer as romantic love interest for Teddy, any sort of interesting like element of that storyline dies when he cheats on her. Like that was what I think his purpose as a romantic interest for Teddy. That's where I think it should have ended. I don't mind the moments where they're friends. I kind of like the energy that they encapsulate before they get back together, but he's like still featured in multiple episodes where they're kind of like frenemies almost. Like they kind of have a snippy attitude towards each other, but are generally kind of just, you know, playing nice and being friends, technically. Like the whole dynamic they have together in the Battle of the Bands, where Teddy and Skylar are supposed to be doing something together because they want to get revenge on Spencer and make sure he doesn't win the Battle of the Bands. PJ and the Vibes, so PJ and Emmett, are also doing the Battle of the Bands together. But this is the episode where PJ and Skylar get together. So after that, Skylar says, well, I don't want to compete in the Battle of the Bands against PJ because I want him to win because I like him now. And so they decide to team up and be a foursome band, and they actually do defeat Spencer. So that was very satisfying because he just feels so smug to me as a character, you know, like very self-satisfied in a way that's really annoying. At least in that episode, they do a good job of making it feel satisfying that Spencer doesn't win, basically. But then later they make him one of those like overly tanned naked guys at Hollister. You'll remember back when Hollister used to have like half naked people, like greeters to be like, yo, welcome to the pier or whatever. He's one of those assholes who's like bright orange wearing nothing but swim trunks and flip-flops, even though it's Denver. Like, girl, get the parka on. Well, Teddy's looking for a job and she sees that Spencer works there and he gives her pointers on how to be like pretend to be a dumb jock. Because that's the thing, is that again, they're making fun of the fact that Hollister would famously hire like underage hot people and make them, you know, scantily clad throughout the mall to attract people to shop there. So he like gives her pointers on how to pretend to be dumb so she could get the job. And I kind of like that dynamic they have where they're kind of a bit on edge with each other, but they're working together for the episode. I liked that a lot. But yeah, then they get back together, which is stupid and I don't like it. But then he moves away. Yay! So he moves to New York, and so I think they try and do a long distance thing. Do they do a long distance thing? I think they try to do a long distance relationship, but then they just realize that it won't work because they can never like FaceTime or Skype, because it was like 2013, so they can't Skype with each other at like good times at all. So they just decide to break up and stay friends. And then they build a little love triangle with Bo and Teddy and Spencer. I'll just conclude the Spencer storyline at the end of the day because we're going to talk about Bo after this, so we'll get into that. But basically, they build a little love triangle between the three of them, and Teddy doesn't pick Spencer again. The first time when, after cheating on her, he tries to get her back and she says no, and then they do get back together after they realize they still have feelings for each other, and then they break up because he moves away, but then he comes back just for her 18th birthday, by the way, let me just say. Not because, like, he doesn't, like, move back to Denver. He just comes to visit her for her birthday and is like, please get back together with me. But it's like, they still have the same problems. Nothing has changed to where it really makes sense. He's just wants to get back together with her. But like I said, she picks the other guy that she's currently with instead of Spencer. But then, in the finale, how they wrap up Teddy's character is that she gets accepted to Yale, which is in New York. I don't know where any of these shit places are on the East Coast. It's in Connecticut. But, like, those are close to each other, right? Should I do a maps of how far Yale is from Juilliard? Basically, what I'm saying is that Teddy gets accepted to Yale, so she decides to go to Yale, and she ends up getting back together with Spencer. I guess being, like, one-ish state away from each other is different from, like, 50 million miles away. I think this is very unsatisfying. I just don't think it really works out well. The only reason why they get back together is because Spencer, for summer break, is back living in Denver with his parents, and he's working, and Bob just, like, happens to run into him. Like, he goes to get ice cream with Charlie, and they just see that Spencer is working at this ice cream shop. So Bob invites him to her graduation party, to Teddy's graduation party, and he shows up, and he's like, I'm still in love with you, blah, 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 and they get back together. Whatever. I feel like his character didn't really serve any purpose anymore, especially after the whole Bo stuff. Like, even though she doesn't even stay with Bo for that much longer after that, because he also ends up moving away, like, I feel like once she chose this guy that she had barely even known over the guy that she had known for years, I think it was proof. I think it was proof that, like, it was over, y'all. I think that was just why it's kind of frustrating for a lot of fans that they ended up just getting back together, because it just kind of feels like, it just doesn't feel satisfying. I feel like what would have made Spencer's character interesting and what would have been okay, I would have been okay with him sticking around longer, would have been if they kind of framed Teddy as, like, the one that got away. I feel like there would be something a little funny about making him into, like, the new Emmett. For those who don't know, Emmett, PJ's best friend character, the, you know, other half of his band duo, of their band, PJ and the Vibes. Emmett's whole thing, other than being PJ's friend, was that he had a massive crush on Teddy, and Teddy did not reciprocate this. Early on, it was established that it was, like, because she was popular, and PJ and Emmett were, like, kind of, like, lame, considered, like, not as cool at school. She just doesn't like him, and that should be reason enough. And I never liked the jokes that they made about Emmett being all into Teddy. I never liked him in that space. I kind of liked it when him and PJ were just, like, weird besties together, you know? But once they kind of separate Emmett from the rest of the family by making him, you know, be PJ's roommate, I think making Spencer now fulfill that role of, like, pining after Teddy and she's not reciprocating would have been a little bit better energy. I still think that those jokes aren't that good, so I would like to limit them, but, like, that's an element of his character that I think would be funny, at least for a couple of episodes, and would have made him have a purpose in the show, because I felt like they kept sticking the actor in the series because they really wanted to, like, push him as, like, a Disney ingenue boy in the similar way that they had done with Bo's actor. And just other people like Mason in Wizards, right? They were really trying to push Greg Sulkin. Bo was a character that I liked 1,000 times more in the show. I found his character more interesting than Spencer's, because at the end of the day, Spencer was a little bit flat because he just had to be, like, hot boyfriend, in my opinion. Obviously, he did have character traits. I listed them. But more often than not, he's just, like, boring male purse for Teddy. So Bo is originally from Tennessee and moves to Denver to live with his aunt. I can't remember exactly why this happens, which immediately adds more intrigue to his character. Like, he comes from a different background entirely. We also learned that his aunt is actually Amy's, like, rival, Karen. She's a literal Karen, like, literally. As in, like, what the name has now been associated with. He's first introduced as being hired as Bob's apprentice because Bob's previous co-worker, Vern. Again, I like that the parents had, like, co-worker friend characters. Vern was always kind of funny. He was just, like, an eccentric old man weirdo type. Vern ends up quitting, and so Bob needs a new, like, hiree for his company, and Bo, even though he has 0 extermination experience, convinces Bob to hire him. And even though Teddy can sense some chemistry between the two of them, she's like, nope, I'm not dating him. Because I think she had just freshly broken up with Spencer at this point. They have some like friend type shenanigans. So like Bo has a girlfriend in Tennessee still that they decided to be long distance with, but he wants to break up with. So he gets Teddy to help break up with his ex-girlfriend, his now ex-girlfriend with her. And then he does something a bit weird, I felt like. This is really funny. So I watched the episodes leading up to the season 1 finale with my aunt, and then the episodes leading up to the episode of season 4 where Bo and Teddy get together. And so she saw Spencer at the ski resort groveling to get Teddy back, and then saw the episode where Teddy and Bo get together. And she didn't like Bo. I can tell you that. She was like, I do not like Bo. I don't appreciate the way he courted her. So what he did is that the setup he does is that he met a girl and he just wanted to hang out with her. He just wants to be friends with her. But this girl asked him out on a date. So he asked Teddy, can you come with me? Can you third wheel this date so that it isn't a date? And so she knows that like I'm not interested in her. And then once they get there, the girl never shows up. So I guess she stood him up. So they end up just having a nice night together. They do karaoke and they like really have a good moment together. And that's when at the end he reveals to her, actually, there was no other girl. I lied to you. I just wanted to go on a date with you, but I had a feeling you would have said no because you just wanted to be friends. And because Good Luck Charlie is what it is, their storylines are really kind of rushed, like I said. It would have been nice if Bo was a longer-term boyfriend because he, other than Spencer, he's like the closest she has to like a substantial other boyfriend. And again, if they would have introduced him sooner and would have axed some of that boring Spencer groveling, it would have been a good time. I think what would have made this storyline a little bit more complex, maybe, she's not together with Spencer. They have their sort of frenemies dynamic, and then Bo gets introduced and she's interested in him, and the same setup where it's like they're not technically dating yet, but he showed interest in her and she clearly also has interest in him. But it's still, they haven't like confirmed things yet. And they haven't, besides that first moment, they haven't really gone on a date. But then she learns that Spencer is graduating. So this would all happen when he leaves to Juilliard. And she finds out that he's leaving to Juilliard. And she all of a sudden is like thinking like, oh, well, now that I officially can't have him, maybe I do want to get back together with him. Maybe I do have feelings for him. Maybe I shouldn't date Bo. And that would make maybe the love triangle a bit interesting, especially if Spencer showed interest in her back. But we would have gotten a lot more episodes of Teddy and Bo being friends, having this sort of chemistry and dancing around each other in season 3, instead of having him introduced early on in season 4. And then we would have gotten them together. We would have gotten Bo and Teddy actually together for once. This is all coming from the framework, of course, that once Spencer and Teddy break up in season 1, they ain't getting back together. I think the arc where at the ski resort he appears and she is possibly considering getting back together with him because she gets a palm reading saying that she's going to meet her soulmate at that ski resort, and then he shows up, so it's like, oh my gosh, it's a destiny. That's a fine storyline, but she doesn't pick him. And I think after that, boom, dead and done, no more romance. He can exist as a friend character from then on. I'm okay with him being redeemed in the story. I just find that their will they won't they throughout the entire series to be exhausting. And to introduce Bo a whole season earlier, in my opinion, is eternally more interesting and unique in that sense. And so, justice for Bo, I guess, is all I have to say. Because very soon after they get together and they're supposed to be dating, Teddy immediately gets like cold feet and starts freaking out about them being together. Because Bo has an apprenticeship at her father's company and he is shown actually really liking being an exterminator, like he grows the passion for it in the same way that Bob has, she starts to freak out and think that she's just going to end up just like her mother and that she's basically dating a version of her father, and that like really scares her, which I guess is a valid like storyline to explore. But to me, it felt very unsatisfying, again, because we basically get no time with them together as an actual couple, other than that one scene where they go on the date under false pretenses, might I add. So I don't think that counts. But outside of that, And then the shenanigans they have to go through when we find out that his aunt is Amy's rival. There's like, they don't even get to like get a cute coupley moment together when they go to that exterminator prom or whatever it was. It was like a bug themed dance. They don't get a cute coupley moment because they're too busy dealing with the drama of that whole fallout, right? Of finding out who his aunt is. So outside of that and Teddy getting cold feet in their relationship, he then leaves. He moves back to Tennessee, okay? He ends up moving back to Tennessee because he lives in a very, very small town, apparently. And the only exterminator who worked in that town, I think dies or retires or something. So they need a new exterminator in town. So he would be confirmed a job. He would be, guaranteed a job if he moved back. So he decides to move back to his family. I think he even says that, like, I won't move back if you'll stay if we date longer. And she's like, no, you gotta move back, because of course she was getting cold feet about their relationship. It just kind of feels like a little bit of a waste of time. Like, why did we introduce Bo as a character if it doesn't really substantially change much about Teddy? I think that was what my problem was with the whole flip-flopping with Spencer, was that her relationship with Spencer that eventually leads to them breaking up, while there were some fun storylines there, like the one where after they've broken up, they both end up dating people who look exactly like them, like their significant other. Like, they find a Spencer lookalike actor, and so she bleaches his hair to try and make him look like less like Spencer, and ends up like fucking up his whole vibe. And then she learns that like he has a Teddy, a lookalike Teddy, that he's dating as well, who's like from New Jersey or something. So like, that's a fun storyline, but I feel like you could have done that at any point. They didn't need to get back together for a big chunk of time. And when they are together for that big chunk of season 3, again, I'm just like, I don't find anything substantial about their relationship, if that makes sense. They do some storylines, they have some fun dynamics together, but honestly, I feel like we got enough of that. We got enough of Spencer already. I feel like we got enough of him when they weren't together in season 2, to where we could have maybe given that time to Bo and made him a more significant character in Teddy's life. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of the problem that I have with in Gilmore Girls with Rory dating Jess. I feel like that's like, as I get older, the less I feel this way. But I feel like that was her best boyfriend in terms of chemistry, but she barely spent any time with him because he was a train wreck of a person. So it's like, even though she was probably the most compatible with Jess at the end of the day, we don't spend enough time with them actually being a couple, because again, his life is a mess and he needs to get his act together, that like, it doesn't feel like, I can understand why people get mad about the Jess Rory truthers, because it's like, they barely even were a couple. We don't even get a date scene with them. That was a big thing everyone always says, is like, they didn't even get a scene where they go on a date with each other. They were too busy fighting, squabbling, or making out to like actually be a substantial couple, if that makes sense. Versus like Dean, we get like 3 years of Dean, or 2 years or something of Dean, and then we get like another like 2 to 3 years with Logan. So it's like, they feel like real boyfriends, like tangible boyfriends of hers, and Jess just kind of feels like a rebound she had after cheating on Dean with him. Bo in a lot of ways feels the same, where I'm like, I like Bo the most out of all of her relationships, because she has a few of them throughout the series, and I like him the most as a character. He's the most interesting to me. His whole thing of like needing to prove his worth to people, I think he says that like, I needed to prove myself to my mom that like I could be like worthy of attention, and it's like, girl, you're barely 18. You don't have to prove yourself to anything. And so the only reason why he feels worthy enough to go back to his hometown is because he's built these skills and has a job and can get a job. Like, there's something there. There's more there with his character that we just don't explore, because he leaves so soon. It makes me think that Luke Bentworth, the actor who played him, like, just didn't want to sign on for too many episodes. He didn't want to be that recurring of a character. But anyways, let's talk about her final romantic interest. I forgot his name. He's pretty unsubstantial, I'll be honest. I just find the whole arc very charming and very funny in a sitcom way. Derek, that's his name. Again, Derek and Teddy end up dating for actually a good length of time. I'm on the fan wiki. I've been using the fan wikis to remember these characters' names, by the way. He also played a recurring role in Zeke and Luther as well. So, the actor, that is. So, I actually thought that Teddy and Derek dated for a lot longer, but they actually only are technically dating for like 2 episodes, which is insane to think about now. Everyone outside of Spencer barely gets any of her time, which again, PMO. So the whole thing about Derek is that he's a biker. He really loves motorcycles and he wears leather jackets all the time and stuff. So she starts dating him, but she's afraid to introduce him to her family because he's supposed to be like a bad boy type. This is the only example where when she's dating this guy, she seems to more like the idea of him than actually like him that much. She doesn't spend much time with him. Well, he's only around for so long, so whatever. But she doesn't spend much time with him, and she is like clearly only really interested in his energy as like a bad boy who owns a motorcycle. What happens is that Teddy introduces Derek to the family, and it's fine. Like they're fine with him. Bob was like, "Can I ride your motorcycle?" Like he actually really likes Derek. And then she like struggles. First of all, Ivy hates him, which is the first red flag. If Ivy has a problem with the romantic interest, that means he's not good for her. Ivy knows what's better for Teddy than Teddy does, okay? Ivy does not like Derek. She thinks that he's a burnout loser, which he is. He's basically a stoner type. He's just way too chill and doesn't really is not super invested in a lot of things. And that's where one of the funniest relationship arcs that Teddy goes through comes through. In his final episode in the show, Teddy decides that she needs to break up with him, and he shares interest that he actually really likes her, and he gets her a leather jacket with her name on it, which is actually really sweet. But she just needs to break up with him. So that nice gesture is what causes her to delay the inevitable. But eventually she does decide, she's like, I'm going to break up with him. And when she does, he doesn't really care too much. He doesn't really react super strongly. He's just like, oh, okay, I understand. You want to move on. You gave your points pretty well. And he's a very chill, relaxed character. And Teddy has a flip out over this. She rages out at the fact that he's not crying and groveling at her knees asking to stay together. She was expecting this big spectacle to happen with her breaking up with him because she's the most important, beautiful person in the world. Why wouldn't he want to be with her? She takes it personally that he doesn't seem to care too much that they're breaking up. It doesn't even seem like they were together for that long. So there you go. But yeah. And so she throws this big old hissy fit over him not caring too much that they've broken up. I think it does a really good job of characterizing Teddy in a way that was very, very fun and interesting. Again, slowly leaking into her character this idea that she is a bit self-centered. She does think about herself a lot. I think she's so used to the intensity and the drama of Spencer and everything by this point that she's expecting that whole situation where it's because Spencer was groveling to get back with her. He was like, please get back together with me, I love you so much. And she kept having to push him away because he cheated on her. And so I just don't think she was expecting a very banal relationship with this guy and was kind of expecting the same situation again, that every guy is just obsessed with me and would obviously want to stay together with me. Not realizing that he's self-content in his own right and is fine with just not being with her anymore. It's a very funny plot line in my opinion. And so that's why I like Derek so much as one of her romantic interests. And Ivy even says it. She's like, you don't really date people like Derek. He's not really your type. She's clearly only doing it to because he was supposed to be a bad boy type, but once she kind of learned that he didn't really fit that small little lane that she made for him because he likes yoga and stuff like that. I think he's a very, like I said, very chill person. He writes poetry. That's the big thing, is that he writes poetry and he's kind of a sensitive soul. So she immediately just finds him boring and no longer is really interested in the idea of him. So that's why I think it's an actual interesting and unique character for her, because again, it develops her character a little bit more. It shows, it's a good way of showing her navigating the world of relationships and kind of figuring out how she wants to, what kind of person she wants to be with, how she wants to be. I feel like we don't really get that with Bo. She just, all it reinforces is that at the moment she doesn't want to be with Spencer. But that's a lie only a few episodes later when they get back together. So it felt for naught. Hi everybody, it's the next day. It's morning time and I moved the camera so you can see my dog sleeping. Right now I want to talk about Gabe. I don't have much to say about Gabe because outside of his everyday like causing problems, being the troublemaker antics, we don't get too much substantial stuff with him. I kind of said this about Max Russo, which is funny because I talked about him for like 50 minutes straight in a video a while back. Another one of my favorite videos I've made. Gabe in general as a character is supposed to be the sort of black sheep of the family. I always wondered if that is why, to a degree, they cast Bradley Stephen Perry, because he has brown hair and everyone else in the cast has blonde hair. It really makes me wonder if like that was a thing. I don't know. I mean, he's a really great actor, so I can see them just ignoring the fact that he has brown hair because he would just perform really well in the role. They even make a joke about this in an episode. There's a plot line where Gabe is like scouted to be in a commercial for like a new theme park that's opening in their town, and he needs like a person to play his mom, and it's supposed to be like a mother-son talking about the wonderfulness of the theme park. And so of course Amy is like all into doing it, but because she's so necrotic about performing and being a star, she messes it up. And so they end up picking a different background actress to play his mom in the plot line. And of course Amy throws a fit over it. But they find this brunette woman and he goes, "She looks more like my mom than you do." Good bit all around, y'all. I mean, everyone in the cast is a fake blonde, let's be honest here. They all got the foil bleaching tones going on, okay? In the pilot episode, I pick up more on the fact that he was less supposed to be like the troublemaker type. I think they were gonna give more of like the antics in that sense to PJ. But he is more of like the forgotten middle child, which is an arc that would get, or like a story plot line that would just get like very boring very fast. His main purpose throughout the episode is to point out the fact that people keep forgetting about him or they don't remember things about him. So like Teddy is introducing the whole family in her first ever vlog, and she completely just forgets to mention Gabe, and Gabe is like, "What about me?" And then later on they keep making jokes where Bob is like, "I know everything about my kids," and he's like, "Yeah, what's my birthday?" And he gets it like completely wildly off. He has no idea where his son even goes to school. And throughout the plot he keeps asking people for food because he's starving and no one's feeding him. So that's why he then sneaks into Mrs. Dabney's house to steal some of her food because he's starving and they're neglecting him. Again, maybe a bit or a joke they could have gotten away with if it was Malcolm in the Middle, but since this show is supposed to be a lot more wholesome, it makes more sense to make him like a troublemaker type, to kind of morph that forgotten middle child energy into something like that. It's clear that he's smart and intelligent, and they do give him plot lines surrounding him struggling with school just because he doesn't apply himself. It's your classic like, you know, troublemaker kid who has intelligence but is using it more towards like trying to get attention rather than doing good in school. He's so bad at turning in his homework, and he's in middle school by the way. He's like in 6th grade at the start of the show. He is so bad at turning in his assignments that he lies to his teacher and says that his parents are fighting and that they're like in an abusive relationship, and that's why he can't get his homework done. When in reality the two of them are not fighting, really. But clearly this plotline was put in to be more of like a lesson moment for the audience, like teaching kids a lesson to like not lie about your family situation, how it can actually be quite dangerous. In reality, if what Gabe was doing like was in the real world, it's very likely that they would have called like CPS on their family. Like that's very possible. But anyways, outside of that, there's another sort of lesson learning storyline they do with Gabe that I don't think was done well, was not good. And that is the arc with Joe. For those who don't remember the storyline with Joe, it is pretty memorable. Or if you haven't never seen this show before, because you just like hearing YouTubers yap about things to you. There's an episode where we learn that Gabe has a bully. Now, since he's supposed to be quite popular and cool in school, it was surprising to hear that he had like a bully. Because he was usually the one doing the bullying type stuff to other kids by, you know, causing trouble and stuff. But we learned that he has a bully, specifically a physically abusive bully. I think he fully comes home from school with a black eye. So Teddy finds out about this and she's really concerned, and she wants to confront the bully and kind of get this person to stop, get Joe to stop. But then we learn that Joe is actually a girl. And so we learn that the reason why Joe is physically abusing Gabe is because she actually kind of has a crush on him and likes him. It's supposed to be an example and almost a sort of role reversal of that thing of like boys being mean to girls because they actually like them and they just don't know how to express their feelings towards girls. But they've kind of like reversed the genders. But I think the problem, first of all, that is a very problematic thing in the first place. It is a good way to like teach a lesson of like that's not a proper way of expressing your feelings. But also making it like physically abusive is a completely different thing. Like, I don't know, even though they're so young and any sort of romance between these two characters is minuscule to none because, again, they're so young, I'm just not very comfortable with them hinting at a romantic relationship between these two characters after this was their beginning. This is how we were introduced to them as a pairing. Joe being redeemed and then becoming friends in the end, I think is fine. They handle it decently enough. And overall, I'm glad that is only really, explored for like a plot line and they swiftly move on from it and keep these two characters as friends. Outside of Joe, though, we get like a few other friend characters for Gabe. My favorite, even though he's only in like 3 episodes, is Jake. He's supposed to be like the bad kid friend for Gabe. Like, we understand that Gabe, I've been using the word troublemaker specifically because he's not like a bad kid. We're supposed to understand that like Jake is like the bad kid influence on him. Gabe, at the end of the day, even though he does do pranks and is constantly getting in trouble at school, he has a good moral compass, and there are certain lines that he just doesn't cross. But his more lenient friend, Jake, is what kind of pulls him to the dark side occasionally. For example, what happens is that he is given money from his parents to buy a birthday gift for Charlie because they've run out of time for throwing her birthday party. They've had some issues. So they're like, we need you to go buy it because we have to do these other things. And so he goes to the store with Jake and he sees that the video game that he's been wanting is the same price, and Jake convinces him to buy the video game instead of buying the gift for Charlie. And it's kind of like a huge moral problem that Gabe faces because he does end up buying the video game and not the toy. And so he feels really, really bad about the fact that like he basically wronged his little sister. And even though kind of like a little character quirk of his early on was the fact that he didn't like Charlie because she kind of like has removed all of everyone's focusing on their attention on her and not on him, which I think is probably where his like troublemaking, like getting in trouble, pulling pranks thing was coming from, again, as a way of like vying for attention because he feels as though he doesn't have enough of it because of Charlie. He still feels really bad about it, and then he tries to go right his wrong by trying to get the toy for her. What really sold me on Jake as a character was a little gag they did during the credits rolling. All of the like post-credit scenes that they do for this show are really weird and kind of bad. They're always reality breaking, like fourth wall jokes in a way. They're not canon, basically, is what I'm trying to say. They're like fever dream weird stuff that they just like probably filmed on the fly while recording the episode. And another plot line with Jake that kind of, shows him being a bad seed again is them wanting to go to a PG-13 movie. I think they're like 11 or 12 at this point. And they find out that one of the workers at the movie theater is fine with selling tickets to underage kids. And Jake is the one who like forces him to go and stuff. When in reality, they could have just gone to like the generic kids movie that was in theaters that day. And during the post-credit scene, they end up doing like a parody style review of the kids movie. They're wearing like sweater vests and they're sitting in fancy armchairs and they're supposed to be like reviewing this movie, but Jake is also like supposed to be a dumb character to kind of contrast Gabe and his evil genius scheming ways. And I don't know, I just found that gag to be really, really funny, and it really like endeared me to their dynamic and made me think, oh, I'd love to see more of them. But then he disappears until like way later on in the show, and then he appears like one more time, and then that's it. He's gone for forever. Other than that, there's a plot line where Gabe becomes friends with a rich kid who is actually kind of an asshole. But he feels the need to stay friends with him because they have all this cool stuff that they can use. Specifically, Bob becomes friends with the kid's dad. So they all go to his house, like Bob and Gabe go over to this family's house, and they like are in their hot tub watching the pay-per-view game on the high-def flat screen. But then they realize that like they shouldn't just pretend to like these people. The other most substantial, I would say, storyline and arc that Gabe gets is his evolving relationship with Miss Dabney, the neighbor. I'm glad they gave Miss Dabney a purpose by having her dynamic with Gabe develop into this like cat and mouse style, like frenemies energy. It was very, very enjoyable as the series went on. Basically, they decide to not have Gabe be as much of a character who is pulling pranks and getting in trouble at school as he gets older, which makes sense. One thing about this show in its late seasons, because I think he's 14 or 15 by the end of the show, one thing that this show really grew to do that I wasn't a huge fan of was characters just out loud stating what their like arc was gonna be for the season. And I know they were doing it on purpose with Gabe as a little fourth wall joke, but like they kind of do it with all the characters and it kind of PMO a little bit. So Gabe just outright says, he's like, getting into trouble and pulling pranks, Gabe, was last season. This season is gonna be, I'm trying to get girls, Gabe. So his new kind of thing is wanting to be seen as popular, trying to like rise the ranks of popularity in school and dating girls. Now that they've now deemed that the character is old enough to start caring about dating people. So of course he gets his first girlfriend, who happens to be Mrs. Dabney's granddaughter. How adorable. Because they were evolving Gabe to no longer be this person causing mischief, they kind of like let Mrs. Dabney fulfill that role of him being like a snarky person, because he was always, you know, throwing quips, having a little bit of snark here and there throughout the series, and he can now direct that at Miss Dabney instead of whatever scheme he's trying to pull. They have some classic all-timer, you know, pokes and jabs at each other. It's a good time. The multi-episode arc that they give Gabe and his girlfriend was also really sweet. We see him like kind of have the Zach Martin struggles of being in a committed relationship. I could get really into the way that they write teenage boys in a lot of these shows. I kind of already did in my Benny Weir video. Again, go check that out if you haven't. Benny is different as a character because he's in like a supernatural style show and he's not in a sitcom directly. But yeah, you can kind of draw the parallels between like Zach Martin, Max Russo, and Gabe Duncan in similar sort of ways. I've decided that it's a spectrum. So here's this very useful chart that you can use all you want, I guess. Gabe is usually a character who's like doing things, and like I said, they don't really evolve his character in a natural way, which is fine at the end of the day. Like they do at least evolve his character. But yeah, he's more known for like the antics that he gets up to than the emotional arcs that he goes on, which I can't say is the same for the older two siblings. They're kind of more well known for like their emotional arcs, like, you know, Teddy getting cheated on and PJ dropping out of community college. Like those are actions that they do in the story, but it's more about their emotional feelings surrounding those situations. Whereas with Gabe, his emotions and feelings about why he's doing the actions are basically never spoken aloud. Like I said, my theory is that it's because he's looking for attention, and it's kind of, you know, hinted at from time to time, but it's not like the outright ethos of the character that you're supposed to pick up on through obvious storytelling and dialogue in the same way it is for the other two. But he's always there. He's not really that forgotten by the narrative. More often than not, they'll just have him like in the room with everyone else and he'll be doing his little quips like he does. Next, let's talk about Bob and Amy. So I'm just gonna lump them together because I only really have like one thought per character that I really want to expound upon a little bit more. I guess we'll start with Bob because it's kind of, both of these things have issues is what I'm saying. I've gone on a bit already about how I think that the parent characters do have problems in terms of their parenting. Like to a degree, they aren't the best at managing their emotions and such with their kids. And I understand because they are supposed to be substantial characters in the series, in the same way that all the other characters are, they are going to have like emotional arcs and problems in a sense. But I don't think the show explicitly says that some of their actions are wrong, when in my opinion, I think they are. Like, for example, them being emotionally volatile at their children. They never outright yell. I don't think it's anything abusive, but it's just like not recommended parenting things. Like I said, Amy constantly kind of like harshly attacking her kids with her desire to be famous, without reading the room and realizing that maybe as the grown-up in the room, you shouldn't be like pushing your children so hard to do something for you, if that makes sense. I don't know, I feel like parents should always be kid first and shouldn't be putting their own self-interests above what makes their kids comfortable. And obviously it's all very lighthearted in the show, it's nothing too serious, so it shouldn't really matter, but to me, it's a little small thing that if they would have just, you know, rewritten the conclusion just a little bit more differently, it maybe would have been a little bit more substantial for families at home. I feel like some parents might see that and see like the uncomfortableness that the kids have, and then maybe seeing Amy react in a more rational way of like, I'm sorry for pushing you guys so hard and making you guys not want to do this with me. I should, you know, take your feelings and emotions into account a little bit more. Maybe parents seeing that at home could see how they might do that to their kids and reflecting on it. Or kids feeling like their parents do that to them and reflecting on, hey, that's not a good thing that my parent is doing. Maybe I should communicate to them better and hopefully they'll change. Again, at the end of the day, it's nothing too serious. The parents are never going to do anything too mean to their kids unless it's a movie. In the movie, I think Amy gets like really mad at Teddy, which to be fair, they are in a very stressful situation. They're stranded in the middle of nowhere basically, and they've lost all their money and all their belongings. And Teddy immediately, you know, gets really, really hurt over it. And again, that is reflected on, and we see that that was a bad thing for her to do. So like, it's done well in certain scenes, but I feel like it should be done better in others. I feel like they prioritize the funniness of Amy being this wacky, eccentric character over her being like maybe reflecting on the possible flaws she may have as a mom. Specifically with Bob though, I do want to tackle the sort of like intense fat phobic jokes they really were starting to push with his character early on in the show. Basically, at any given moment, you could expect if Bob was on screen, somebody was going to make a joke about how fat he was or about how bald he was, which I'm not the hugest fan of. The occasional bald joke, the occasional fat joke, it's all in good fun. It's all just jesting, especially when it's from their family, and they know as a fact that it's not too serious. All of these characters like to riff on each other, and it's easier to have it feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that they're all family, and that's just maybe just how they communicate with each other. Yeah, Disney Channel writers really had a knack for insulting their characters' appearances for just quick filler jokes and scenes. And I wonder if the optics of doing that to a character who was a woman was seen as quite bad for Disney Channel, so that's why they were almost exclusively all directed towards Bob. I think of a Nickelodeon show like Victorious, where they were constantly talking about how ugly and gross Trina is, and how that maybe the Disney Channel would want to avoid the optics of that. But over time, the actor who plays Bob ends up losing a lot of weight and ends up getting really buff and muscular, and so they have to kind of like acknowledge that in the show and acknowledge how now that he's like changed in weight, he was like kind of uncomfortable with the way that people will talk about his body. And you know, again, it's all very lighthearted, but they do have a discussion of it. This is something that the actor who played Jerry Russo talked about on the Wizards of Waverly podcast. He talked about how he was actually uncomfortable with and upset with the fact that they were constantly making fat jokes about him and like dumb guy jokes. And so he told them, can you please calm them down a bit? And I wonder if the actor who played Bob had to do the same. So yeah, maybe just don't comment on people's appearances in general is, I think, the rule of thumb. Because, you know, like I said, within the context of the show, I can see it not being too harmful to like have the children kind of, you know, make fun of their parents' appearance. I mean, I would never do that because I was taught in a toxic way to respect my elders, so I wouldn't dare speak on a physical attribute of my parents ever. But I think in white families, it's a little bit more common, I guess. Like, I think they do the married with children thing as well as the Malcolm in the Middle thing, where, you know, they show the family insulting each other, but as soon as a random stranger says the same thing to one of them, they immediately go to defend their family. It's clear that they all really do care about their family and are willing to square up with anybody who insults them or is rude to them. Is that all? My dog's nap is over. So I think that's all. Hi everybody, I'm sorry for a different audio quality moment right here, but I'm currently pacing around in my kitchen at 12:30 at night because I just have so many thoughts and they're all bursting out of my mind and I can't feasibly script it right now, so I'm just gonna rant into a microphone and hope for the best. I'm currently using my phone microphone to record, and also I'm in my kitchen like I said earlier, so you know. But something I've kind of spiraled thinking about is the Duncans' financial situation. Now, I understand the show isn't Roseanne or anything. I wasn't expecting them to like go really deep into and have like full arching storylines into the Duncans having like family money problems. But to a certain degree, I think I was expecting a little bit more of a discussion on the matter. After Toby is born, Amy tries to go back to work as a nurse, but finds herself being constantly worried about the state of her children and not being able to focus on her job because she would rather be taking care of her children, which is a completely reasonable and rational feeling to have. So at the end of the episode, she decides that she does not want to go back to work and that she wants to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom as her job. Now, I think this is a perfectly fine revelation and story arc for this character to take. If this is what Amy thinks is going to be best for her family and for her own sake, I think it is wonderful and great. But they specifically say that like things financially are going to be different because they won't be a 2-income household anymore. Even more so because they have 5 kids now. Yes, one of their kids doesn't live under their roof anymore, so technically they only really have to feed and clothe and to essentially parent 4 kids. But that doesn't change the fact that things are going to drastically change when it comes to their budget because of this decision. And it's pretty much never addressed again, and eventually Amy does actually get a new job. I also understand the fact that like Amy essentially just wants to be famous and wants to be on TV and wants to be a star, but she is sort of settled for this comfortable family life because she loves her children. She doesn't want to be a nurse. So if she just wants to change career paths and decides to be a stay-at-home mom while waiting to pursue another job, that would make sense. And that's probably how like the writers constructed it, but that is not how it's actually portrayed in the actual text of the show. Essentially, she quits her job so she can be with her kids, and then when a new opportunity comes up for her to work on Good Morning Denver, she decides to go work for Good Morning Denver. And this, for some reason, led me down the rabbit hole of some like weird algorithm I've been like caught in the wave of, and I don't know if it's because of my age or because of the fact that like I'm consistently researching Good Luck Charlie and family-themed content all the time now. But videos I've been getting a lot of on my YouTube page nowadays has been like stay-at-home mom themed content. And not specifically trad wife content. Like the people I've been seeing seem like normal middle-class families. These content creators are clearly not trying to sell the idea and the concept and the lifestyle of a traditional wife, like the label trad wife has been placed onto specific creators. I really do enjoy these stay-at-home moms and their videos and them filming them cooking and cleaning for their children. This is stuff that I would see in my everyday life as a child, being surrounded by other parents and my own parents to a certain degree. So it's kind of nostalgic in that sense, and it's nice to like finally be on the parents' side of things, not actually having to have children of my own, to be a wet blanket about everything because I have to be. But I honestly can't help but just feel like the reason why these creators have gotten so popular in recent years is because of the massive turn to conservatism and homemaking as a place of women's work. Again, I think that this is a completely valid job and it's like a really hard job to do. And I get so mad when I see comments under these videos, people being like, these women don't have real jobs, they just stay at home all day. And like, obviously being a stay-at-home mom is an actual really hard job to do. There's a lot of work and effort and planning that goes into that job. You start to realize that when you try and live without it after living with it for so many years, like so many kids grew up with. But also like specifically for these content creators who are making stay-at-home mom content, like they do have a job outside of being a stay-at-home mom. and their job is content creator, like, they have to film these videos, and they have to edit them, and they have to upload them. As somebody who does the same thing on a much bigger scale, obviously, I'm not making vlogs here, but like, as somebody who also has to record, edit, and upload videos, it's a lot of damn work. One might even say, like, if you're really, really streamlined and fast at the process, it could be a part-time job, but that's still a job. If your full-time job is mom, and you also have a part-time job, then like, you're working 2 jobs. So these are 2-income households at the end of the day, even though they are framed as single-income households with the father only working while the mother is a stay-at-home mom. And again, while I really love the fact that these creators are sharing their lives and expressing themselves in ways that like are, you know, still very feminist and true to themselves, I can't help but think that like, if it wasn't for Nara Smith, these videos also wouldn't be popular as like the counter to that sort of like cynical plastic trad wife thing. So this kind of has like nothing to do about Good Luck Charlie, but also like it kind of does, because as a family sitcom with these traditional norms and boundaries, it kind of upholds the nuclear family as a normal way of life, which for some people, and I bet a lot of you are like, oh yeah, duh, like whatever, what's the problem here? This is life. And yeah, for a lot of people it is. But like, why is this quote unquote normal? At the end of the day, I think upholding heteronormativity is not really a facet of pop culture that I necessarily think should be done as often. I don't know if that's like a controversial take or not. I think we have enough. I think we have enough nuclear family content, you know, enough of a back catalog from like Donna Reed to now with Good Luck Charlie, that maybe we can focus on telling other stories and enriching other forms of life that are also comfortable and valid. I wouldn't doubt that the Disney Channel is doing that right now. I've heard really good things about Andy Mack, which I think is an example of this to a degree. Maybe one day I'll get around to watching that show. No promises that it'll ever become a video. Is anyone going to click on an Andy Mack video? I think not, but I am trying to kind of like work my way through the history of Disney Channel sitcoms that for after my time, because I still think they're important for understanding and enriching myself in like the context of the history of this network, because the history of Disney Channel, as I've been trying to emphasize on my channel and in this video specifically for a lot of time, has been that like the history of Disney Channel is the history of television. It's sort of like a microcosm for what the entire thing is, and that's why I have such a deep fascination with it at the end of the day. Hey guys, it looks like I'm in heaven right now, jeez. I'm currently editing this segment of the video, and I was looking up clips of Donna Reed, specifically of the Donna Reed show, that I could use as like background footage while I was talking, and I found a clip from like a late season Donna Reed show episode that I felt personally called out about.
It's from my term paper, Obsolete Attitudes of the Provincial American Male. Oh, it's intriguing. Now, what were you saying?
He was about to tell us how men handle women.
Marvelous! I knew this was Mother Lode country. Scotty, you are the small-town male chauvinist in all his pristine glory. You're perfect!
I'm not Scotty, I'm Jeff.
Notice how anger is your emotional response to any female challenge to your authority.
This is why I'm so against tradwife content, because like that's me. That lady that we're all supposed to hate and think is cringe is me. I mean, like, I don't do that to real life people, you know, when we're having lunch or whatever at the sock hop at the soda shop. But yeah, like women who think and analyze deeply are like shamed in this culture, and it's seen as like unladylike and unkempt. So
it's understandable. The ego erosion is enormous now that men are the weaker sex.
What? Men are the stronger sex.
Well, on what basis?
So yeah, I'm glad that this isn't our culture anymore. I mean, like they want us to go back to this, and that's what I think is repugnant. But anyways, intermission done. Back to the thinky thoughts conclusion of this video. So hopefully over the course of this video, I have explained the importance of and highlighted Disney Channel as a serious pillar of TV history, because when traditional cable went on full reality TV programming mode and let their networks decay, Disney Channel was essentially accidentally handed the baton of sitcom rulership by these other networks by letting all of their talent run to the mouse. While all of those talking points of Disney Channel just being for babies may be seen as a straw man argument, I still think they represent a decent handful of people who I run into in my everyday life as the frenetic person who rants about sitcoms and the Disney Channel specifically. Yes, I'm like this in real life. I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded by people who accept my neurodivergency when it comes to this network, and they let me rant about the history of the DCOM, but the average general public person isn't going to indulge in my thoughts about Disney Channel, as in what I consider to be analytical work. I don't know, y'all let me know. Even if it is to someone who is more thinky than I am. I've been liking using the term thinky lately. I feel like it gets across what I'm trying to say very efficiently. Just know that this network, while being seeped in nostalgia and reverence from people who were around during its heyday, those people still don't take it seriously as pieces of media. And obviously I'm here to rectify that in some sort of way. Okay, I didn't charge my camera battery all the way, so we're working on borrowed time. So very rarely do I reach a situation where I'm writing my script and all of the thoughts that I have are so potent and so intense, and I want to get them out so fast that like I stop having the ability to type and I just start like shaking my hands. And that happened for this next segment that I want to talk about. So I'm just going to rant to the camera. Like the good old days. I will be ranting about the straw man arguments once again. I promise this is the final time I'll do it throughout the video. Yay! It seems like their own selfish association with that piece of media is the only reason why they're giving reverence to the thing at all. I don't like how people specifically use the term that it's like for dumb people or that it's like a dumb show. Obviously, I can very easily get personally offended, you know, because I'm the sitcom enjoyer. But at the end of the day, when we call a certain piece of media a certain thing that's not smart or that's lowbrow media, I want us to use our brains and try and think, why? Why is this considered lowbrow media? What about it speaks towards the lowest common denominator of people in your mind? And let's unpack that and maybe, you know, unearth some internal biases that we might have. In a lot of ways, the sitcom was like the family structure, so it wasn't seen as something that was lower media. In a similar way to how you maybe watch a YouTube video with your family, or you share TikToks with your friends. They're just fun little laughs that we have in the moment. The sitcom was that. Something that I really want to emphasize, and I think is very fascinating, is how the current conversation that we're having about social media, like right now, is the exact same conversation that people were having about television in the 50s and 60s. This whole idea that it was ruining the film industry with its slop, you know, brain rot media, and that maybe we can try and join it instead of try and fight it. Like, y'all remember Quibi? I don't even remember Quibi, if I'm being honest with you guys. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's the death of the theater because you could just watch it from the comfort of your own home. Why would you ever leave your house? Yeah, sounds very familiar. The film industry didn't die after that. They just, you know, remorphed themselves into the blockbuster with your Star Warses and your Jawses. Your Back to the Futures is. And I have no horse in the game of advocating for the value of, like, TikTok, or even to a degree YouTube videos. That's somebody else's battle to fight. My niche is the sitcom, of course. So why did the sitcom die? It's a good question. Let's try and answer it. I specifically decided to not use any scholarly resources for this segment and mainly just go off of my own personal yappenings and also what the blogs have been saying, what the internet people have been saying. One resource that I found to be very fascinating is from the website solidsignal.com. It's a blog. In 2022, Stuart Sweet wrote this article talking about the day the sitcom died. Now, the two main things that this person cites as being the reason why the sitcom died is specifically the DVR and prestige television. I'm about to square up on my prestige television rant, but we'll get there. The article supposits that Friends was basically the last good sitcom. What an easy sitcom to pick, the biggest one. And that with the invention of the DVR, or TiVo, whatever gender of cable television that you had. I think DVR stands for direct video recorder, but I could be wrong. But the DVR allowed you to tape your shows on a thing. I don't know the technology deeply, but you could record your episodes, and then so you could watch them later. It basically was like the early progenitors of the binge method. I know for sure that I did that. I've seen like every episode of George Lopez maybe 10 times over through this method of like taping an entire season and then binging it all in one sitting during summer vacation. One day reviewing George Lopez will happen. It's kind of like my white whale. I find it impossible to find. I know it's on a streaming service, but I don't want to pay for one. I don't want to pay for another one. And I've been trying to get like DVD copies, and it's basically impossible to find. So the article supposits that because people were able to choose what they watch more selectively and not have to watch whatever was put in front of their faces like before, that people decided to choose more deep, complex programs like prestige television. The specific quote I wanted to pull from here is, "Let's be honest, Mad Men makes a show like Three's Company look pretty dumb in contrast. People wanted that extra challenge. They didn't want the same 10 jokes over and over. Really, that's why the sitcom died." I feel personally called out with the reference to Three's Company specifically. That's a very interesting specific show to pick, in my opinion. If there's any more progressive or more complex sitcom out there, it's most definitely Three's Company. Is that just because I have a thing for John Ritter? Let's not talk about that, maybe. Listen, John Ritter has that 1970s swag that a lot of people don't understand, and I don't feel the need to explain it right now because it's sort of a pearls before swine kind of situation, The girls who get it, get it. The girls who don't. Half the jokes on I Love LA are basically stolen from Three's Company, so, better pay some damn respect. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I haven't seen I Love LA. When I say that all I watch is sitcoms, I'm not lying, okay? I'll get around to it. I'll get around to it. I'll watch it. I heard it's good. To me, the term prestige television is basically an oxymoron. Like, prestige television. It's fucking television. It was never prestigious. I think television deciding that it wanted to be like movies as much as possible is what led to the death of the sitcom. Not only because it is the most TV style of medium to exist, like it can only exist in the ecosystem of television, but also because by stripping away everything that made television what it was, it basically ruined it. Like, prestige television are basically just long movies now. And I thought no one wanted to see movies anymore, goddammit. Maybe let movies be movies and let TV be TV. That's my thought. I'm a bit of a TV purist in that sense. And I think it's because of that specific reputation that is why it ran away from it as fast as it could, switching different aspect ratios to be similar to television, right? Everything's in 16:9 now. The average television format used to be 4:3. There's not this sort of evergreen, lasting, relevance with television shows anymore in a way that Good Luck Charlie had. Yeah, I just remembered that this is supposed to be a Good Luck Charlie video. Because of the specific reference that this article made, I decided to watch a few episodes of Three's Company just to remind myself of, sitcoms old. And I was surprised with just how fresh and honest it felt as a show, It shocks me that people call television like this stale and old because, again, I referenced I Love LA just right now, but it really is speaking to that universality of human existence in the same way that Friends does. Y'all have watched Friends, right? Pretty much everyone I know has seen all of Friends because it's been on streaming services these days. In a similar way that everyone was able to watch Friends back when we all had cable because it was on reruns constantly on cable. I feel like people would like sitcoms more if they had the taste for it, if they had the palate for it these days. Television nowadays, which is all streaming service stuff, has not really trained people to appreciate the medium, and I guess that's fine at the end of the day. I was trying to think, well, there has to be a place where situational comedy still exists. That's what sitcom stands for, after all. There's no way that a whole genre of comedy has just blipped from existence. And the answer is, yeah, it hasn't. It just exists as TikToks now. I have to shout out the YouTube channel Captain Midnight. They were the ones who really illuminated my mind to this, because he's also somebody who makes plenty of video about sitcoms and old school television and how it's different these days. The tides have definitely shifted already, and we're commenting on it in the current state. And he was the one who really pointed out to me that, like, yeah, all of these jokes that would be put into, like, a TV show are now on your feed every day. So people don't have the appetite for it in a TV show. They've been trained to believe that a TV show is supposed to be something more elevated. It's different from your phone. And like I said, I'm not the person who is going to advocate for TikToks being like an important piece of media that needs to be respected. Someone else can do that. I don't even use TikTok, so I have no skin in the game. Y'all ever seen Bistro Huddy? Or the Neon Girls? Those are people who were showing up on my YouTube Shorts feeds so much that I ended up subscribing to them. So now I just go to my subscriptions box if I want to see their shorts. I don't want to hear anyone making fun of me for watching YouTube Shorts, okay? I don't even really watch them. I have like a handful of creators that I found, and I don't even have my algorithm turned on because I have my watch history turned off. So whenever I find a new person, I just like go to my subscriptions feed, and I have like a 5 to 10 minute scroll because I have a couple of people who only make short form vertical content that I subscribe to. Anyways, I don't need to justify it. Who cares? Why do I care what you people think about me watching shorts? I don't. I shouldn't, at least. That's a sitcom. Bistro Huddy is literally a sitcom. I even see people say, like, oh, this should be made into a TV show. No, it shouldn't, because if it were to be made into a TV show, it would lose the sparkle that it has of the episodic storytelling format. It's structured exactly like a sitcom. You can watch any video and still pick up on the dynamic and understand where you are. You know, you didn't have to watch it from the very beginning, but you can go back and watch all of them if you want. There are storylines that are overarching, but still have narrative conclusions every once in a while, so you don't have to watch the next one. There are hard-boiled characters who have very discernible archetypes that you can pick up on right away, again, which contributes to that being able to watch at any point during the series in a moment. And arguably lower production quality. It is literally just one person playing all of the characters with different wigs on, and I thoroughly enjoy it. It's a good time. I'm glad that it exists within that space. If it was a different decade, it either would have been made into a sitcom or had the possibility of never being made at all, because creators like this would not be given the opportunity. And then plus their specific voice gets to really linger within the show because they're like actively playing all of the characters. That adds its own charm and element to things. And if they were to try and make it a real sitcom but keep it on the platform, people would immediately abandon it, because that sort of low effortness is what people understand the visual language of a TikTok to be. What I'm saying is all of the things that I'm talking about right now that you notice from these TikToks that don't bother you when you just watch them and then keep scrolling is how people engaged with sitcoms. And you had a fun time doing that on your phone, right? So you would assume that people were having a fun time doing that with their TVs back in the day. It's possible to say that Disney Channel is what killed the sitcom by essentially making it the modern equivalent of a cave painting that archaeologists like to unearth the meaning of way after the fact of its creation. Disney Channel, in all its efforts for keeping the sitcom alive in the modern day in that old style you know and love, isn't employing the same level of craft into its shows like it once used to, in my opinion. And I think that's how shows like GLC run out of steam by the end of the day. I feel like that's an example of that. Once the money starts printing itself, why bother working hard to make it in the first place, am I right? Let's be honest, Good Luck Charlie feels like it reaches a certain state of autopilot eventually, just trying to get another couch gag out and eventually another episode of TV so the writers can move on to making something they actually care about. Or the network started pinching their time quota super thin so they didn't feel encouraged to work harder or provide more for the series to go out with a swing instead of a whiff. I mean, it is just for babies, isn't it? Disney Channel as a network doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, right? It's a borderline babysitter that only really needs to be the equivalent of bright colors and shapes moving around to distract the youth of today for a couple more seconds while mommy pops another aspirin. It never used to be that way, honestly. I would argue the internet is what turned the Disney Channel into that, because people started getting their entertainment that they really cared about from their phones and social media platforms, like this very website you're using right now. So there you go. We killed the sitcom, and we couldn't be any more happy about it. Like and subscribe and all that jazz. See you next time.